Okay, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines will remain off. Go for it.
Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board for the Town of East Hampton, meeting for March 1st, 2023. I am filling in for Sam. I just want to say, first of all, I was lucky enough to speak to Sam today. As we mentioned last time out, he's recovering from a medical situation. Very pleased to say he's doing very well. We hope to have him here very soon, as early as the next meeting, but hopefully as soon as possible. So we send him our best and we will do our best in his place. We're going to follow the agenda as it was posted with one exception. The first item, red-tailed hawk modification, has been removed from the agenda. It turns out that modification was not necessary based on a little bit of confusion of language in that resolution, so that's been removed. With that, we'll go right into site plan review. The first item is new NCW at St. Peter's Chapel 2. And Eric Chance will give the introduction.
Okay. Just hoping that I'm screen sharing effectively. Yeah. So on the aerial photograph, you'll see the rough location of
Ed,
the
do you want
property.
to just say that it's announced publicly? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Ed and I'm recused on this matter.
Ed Krug is recused, so he's excused himself for a moment.
So anyway, this is a long shot of the location of the property within town. I will zoom in on the subject parcel. This is an application to construct a new personal wireless service facility consisting of 6 antennas and associated equipment, along with a 340 square foot fenced-in ground level equipment compound. The parcel is Zone B residence and is situated on Old Stone Highway in Springs. It contains a chapel building, which predates the adoption of zoning, and the parcel is entirely surrounded by residential zoning and uses. Under secret in Chapter 128 of the Town Code, this is an unlisted action. We recommend that the board declare lead agency status. So just to give you some background, the planning board denied a previous proposal at this location for a facility to consist of a 50-foot tall campanile or bell tower adjacent to the existing chapel building. That occurred in 2020. The subject application is the result of a settlement agreement reached between the town, including the planning board and ARB, and New Singular Wireless, or AT&T. As a result of these subsequent Article 78 proceedings, both the planning board and the ARB are essentially charged with approving the subject application within 60 days, or alternatively, allowing the applicants to construct a previously applied for wireless facility, again, a 50-foot tall bell tower structure. The board may wish to discuss the implications of the settlement agreement with counsel. We also have outside counsel for the town, Kelly Wright, here this evening. In order to aid the review of both boards with respect to its comparison with the previous application, we have available the set of plans and elevations illustrating the previous project, the 50-foot tall bell tower. I will get to those when the board gets into its discussion. The board should take note that since the time of the last review of the previous wireless application, the town code has been substantially amended with respect to the applicable standards for such facilities. Most of the applicable standards of review can now be found in a separate section of the town code. The general special permit standards also apply for the proposed project. The board should note that the specific special permit standards now essentially direct a reader to that aforementioned section of the code, which is 255-1-41. We basically consolidated all the requirements regarding and standards regarding wireless facilities into that section of the code. Most notably, though, and this is a carryover from the previous code, we still rank properties in terms of avoidance areas and opportunity sites. Obviously, avoidance areas are those that, because of certain features, are recommended to not have wireless facilities located. Opportunity in those areas. Opportunity sites obviously are the opposite. They're areas where we want to see new facilities. So I won't go through the full list that's listed in the town code, but basically the proposed project location meets none of the opportunity site criteria, and it does meet one of the avoidance area criteria, as the chapel has recently, since the time of the review of the last application, been designated as eligible for the state and national register of historic places. So as I mentioned at the time of the previous application, or at the time it was submitted, which was October of 2015, and subsequently when it was denied approval, which was July of 2020, the subject parcel in the St. Peter's Chapel itself had no formal local, state, or federal designation recognizing its historical significance. However, in February of last year, St. Peter's Chapel was recognized by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation as eligible to be placed in the New York State and/or National Register. And the reasons they give are because it is, and I quote, associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns in our history, and also embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or represents the work of a master, or possesses high artistic values, or represents a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction, appropriate design, materials, and coloration, or excuse me, sorry. Yeah, so that's quoting the criteria that SHPO judged this by and put it on the eligible list. We included the full report from SHPO and attached it to our memorandum. Although the board may wish to discuss this with council, it does not appear that the historic designation of the chapel would alter the procedure of review for the proposed project. The applicants have submitted elevation drawings and a sightline photo simulation, and I will attempt to show you that now. So if I switch over, so these are some photo simulations showing the proposed 70-foot tall monopole. I'll zoom in on some of these pictures. The ones you really should probably focus on are up in the top left-hand corner and then the bottom left-hand corner. Basically, the monopole will be significantly visible from both Old Stone Highway and surrounding residential properties. I will attempt to zoom in for you. So you can see that's basically a visual rendering looking down south on Old Stone Highway. And then this is this is visualization from looking across a neighboring residential property. And then this is basically a straight on view from Old Stone Highway. The board may wish to discuss potential methods for reducing the conspicuous nature of the facility, including screening and coloration of the monopole and attached equipment, which is currently proposed to be dark brown, along with the equipment enclosure fencing, which you can see here is depicted as being white. Again, this will require review of the ARB. I'll get to that in a second. The application has been referred to the town's wireless consulting firm, Cityscape, and formal comments are still pending. Cityscape will, among other things, verify compliance with FCC radio frequency emission standards and the structural integrity of the monopole and equipment mounts. I'm just going to jump back to the overall site plan here. Under the town code, separate approval of the ARB is required for the project. However, the ARB scope of review of the application is limited in comparison to most applications, as this project is most of their applications, as this project is a wireless facility. We've included the standards that the ARB must review in the scope of their review. Basically, the code says that the ARB, the scope of their review shall be for design features only. Standards of review shall be limited to those provided elsewhere in the section of the code. And basically the ARB submits a recommendation to the planning board. So the ARB is going to discuss this application again, just basically under the limitation of the scope of their review. They'll probably be mostly focused on what color the pole and equipment should be, what color it should be, as well as the equipment compound, type of fencing, coloration of the fencing, those sorts of things. Okay. So no landscaping has been proposed. The board may wish to discuss with the applicants if they feel that there's anything additional that can be provided. You can see on this plan, essentially, and then if I jump back to that previous photo simulation, basically the idea here, it's a very simple facility. Service vehicles would drive straight up to it. This front of the equipment area is a gate that would open up. So basically, you couldn't put any landscaping that would go across that driveway for obvious reasons. You couldn't really put anything tight to the fence for the same reason that you'd be blocking access. It is possible that along the sides here of the access road, you could require some evergreen screening, arborvitae, something of that sort. That would at least cut the sight line as you come up and down Old Stone Highway. But largely, kind of what you see is what you have here, and it would be a very visible facility. They're proposing some lighting that, looks like floodlights that would be at the edge of the equipment compound. That is non-compliant. We will work with the applicants to find compliant lighting. Just want to show you basically the rough elevation design of the facility there. So lighting is non-compliant right now, but it's nothing that can't be resolved. So basically, in conclusion, the application is complete. The board should declare lead agency status and discuss the proposed new facility and any changes or mitigation which could improve the facility and reduce any potential adverse impacts. The ARB should consider their standards and advise the applicants and the planning board accordingly. The planning department will prepare the EAF parts 2 and 3 for the next work session and will include any changes or mitigation required by either or both boards. The application will then also be scheduled for a public hearing. Although this should be verified by council, it's the understanding of the planning department that the result of negotiations and litigation between the applicants and the town has resulted in a situation where the town must approve the currently proposed project with acceptable changes or mitigations possible within 60 days of the receipt of the application. If the necessary local approvals are not obtained, the applicants will ostensibly be entitled to construct the originally proposed wireless facility, which most conspicuously includes a 50-foot tall Campanile bell tower adjacent to the chapel building. And just to give you an idea of what that looked like, this is the previous visual rendering that was prepared. We prefer the currently proposed 70-foot tall monopole design, primarily for the reason that decommissioning and removing it would seem to be less difficult than that for this bell tower structure. Should wireless service be improved in the area, obviating the need for the subject facility. Basically, the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation made the same recommendation in its memo dated February 6th of this year. I quote from their report, SHPO continues to prefer the monopole option because the monopole can be removed without damaging the historic building, and it does not create a false sense of architectural history given its clearly contemporary appearance. With that being said, the planning department, as we stated from the original date of the original application here, which again was 2015, we still feel that this location is inherently an inappropriate one for a new wireless facility of this design or any other. The planning department, the town's wireless consulting firm, Cityscape, the supervisor's office, the town board, the East Hampton Police Department, and various other town departments have recently expended great time and effort to modernize the town code. Among the many goals of these efforts was to discourage or prevent the need for macro wireless facilities in established avoidance areas, such as areas adjacent to historic resources or residential property. New Singular Wireless's insistence on constructing a macro personal wireless facility at this location disregards and contravenes these efforts. The planning department would prefer to work with New Singular Wireless to find alternative locations which could remedy the known coverage gap in this area of southeastern Springs / northern Amagansett. Another alternative could be a network of small cell installations within street right-of-ways, potentially augmented by a macro facility in a different but nearby location. However, as it seems inevitable at this time that some form of macro wireless facility will be constructed at this location, the planning department recommends approval of the option which is easiest to decommission at a future date while still being the least obtrusive while in operation, and will work with Cityscape through the process of formulating the new wireless master plan for East Hampton to offer a superior way to provide wireless service in this area of the town. That being said, I will reiterate that if you are in fact put in the position of, and I will just scroll back, which basically is this proposal that's in front of you right now, versus the previous 50-foot tall bell tower campanile. We agree with the Office of Historic Preservation and would recommend that you approve the subject application in front of you right now. Again, simply by virtue of the fact that it would be the easiest to remove if we can provide adequate coverage in this area of Springs.
Okay, would the applicant like to be heard? Thank you, Eric. Thank you for that detailed presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman. Thank you, Eric, for the intro to the application. Members of the Planning Board, my name is Matt Fitzgerald. I'm an attorney with Phillips Lytle, here today on behalf of the applicant, New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, better known to you and members of the public as AT&T. It's good to be back. It's good to see so many familiar faces from the last time I was here. I understand we have at least one new board member. So for you, some of this information will be new. For the rest of them, I'm afraid you've heard a lot of this before, but I'll go through the application, what the proposal is, as well as the team that I have here with me today. With me, I have our site acquisition consultant from Centerline, Matt Lindbaum, our engineering consultant from Dewberry Engineers, David Revitt, our environmental consultant from Acer Associates, Scott Horn, and our RF engineer from the project from Primera, Neil Arceo. So you heard Eric provide a description of the application. The proposed facility is a 70-foot tall monopole. AT&T has two different centerline heights. Our antennas are grouped in two different spots on the tower, one at a centerline height of 67 feet and one at 57 feet, with an associated backup generator designed to remedy the significant gap in coverage along Old Stone Highway, Barnes Hole Road, Neck Path, and Red Dirt Road. So what I'd like to walk through with the planning board here, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you have questions, the history of the application, brief overview of the settlement agreement, and then I'd like to dig into the considerations that the board could be looking to with respect to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR. So in terms of the history, there exists a significant gap in coverage along Old Stone Highway, Barnes Hole Road, Neck Path, and Red Dirt Road. This significant gap in coverage has been acknowledged by the town. It's a part of the settlement agreement that all parties acknowledge the existence of this coverage gap. And since October of 2015, AT&T has been working with the town to find a solution to remedy this significant gap in coverage. In October of 2015, the original application filed for an extension to the existing 30-foot tall church steeple. In December of 2015, the ARB vice chairman at the time requested that AT&T pursue the campanile design, believing that it maintained the scale, character, and integrity of the chapel. From 2016 to 2018, AT&T worked on addressing various additional alternatives, both alternative sites and alternative designs proposed by the various boards of the town. In May of 2019 is when the application was, I'll say, reactivated, when we came back with the Campanile facility, having evaluated all of the other alternatives and determining that the Campanile facility was the one that we were ultimately going to continue to pursue. At that time, the shot clock had 77 days remaining. We submitted updated materials, and we worked through the town zoning process. And again, many of the board members here were here for many of those meetings, so I don't want to dig into it too much. But from June of 2019 up until June or July of 2020, we met with the various boards. We received approval of the Campanile design from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We received a negative declaration from this board pursuant to SEQR in a coordinated environmental review for the Campanile. And then ultimately in the summer of 2020, the planning board determined to deny the application. Litigation commenced following that. Following litigation, a settlement agreement was agreed upon. The chapel was determined to be eligible for listing on the for the National Register of Historic Places, which I'll touch on the implications of that later. But as Eric said, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually impact the town's review process. And then finally, we're here now. We filed the application pursuant to the settlement agreement, which again is the application that Eric described. With respect to the settlement agreement, I would just say that after the federal action was filed, the parties continued to have discussions about the potential resolution of the matter, including the significant gap in coverage. We went through various alternative designs, locations, and it was agreed upon that the town would prefer that AT&T pursued this application, an application for a 70-foot pole, rather than continue the litigation on the Campanile and bear the risk that if AT&T were to prevail, the Campanile would be constructed. So while the town planning board certainly initially felt that the St. Peter site was inappropriate, through the settlement agreement, the agreement with AT&T between the parties is, as Eric said, it's essentially the Campanile or the 70-foot pole. Now, I would say the 70-foot pole application stands on its own, right? It's an application that you consider in its entirety as if there wasn't this background. But you can't ignore the fact, of course, that in the event of a denial, the result will be AT&T constructing the 50-foot Campanile facility that the planning board previously denied. With respect to alternatives, Eric had touched on this in terms of pursuing other alternatives because of there's belief that this site is inappropriate under the town's siting standards. I'll say that I understand that the wireless code was indeed updated since the time that the application was denied. At the time the application was filed in 2015, and we made a point of this during our application in the discussion several years ago, the site was actually not an avoidance area at that time. It was a preferred site in the town because it was church property, which at that time was one of the preferred locations. Because it is now determined to be eligible, it's contemplated as an avoidance area. But regardless, even with that being the case, the extensive designs that have been considered, the extensive locations that have been considered, demonstrate that there are no alternative sites to go to, that there are no alternative designs to consider at this point, that the 70-foot pole is the only alternative that the planning board was willing to hear in consideration of not going with the Campanile. So what were those other designs? What did the planning board consider for the benefit of those who may not have been around for all of these? There was the original steeple extension. There was a request that we consider whether we could go in the existing steeple. Didn't work for RF reasons. It was simply too low, only 30 feet above ground level. Locating a Campanile directly behind the church, locating the Campanile slightly offset, which is the proposal that the planning board ultimately denied, a 50-foot pole located behind the church, which this board, I believe in 2018 or 2017, decided it didn't like putting a monopole directly behind the church if you're on Old Stone Highway facing the chapel. That was disfavored. There was a request that we consider putting a 50-foot pole in the woods. So essentially this application, but at 50 feet. The reason that doesn't work is if you look at the plans and if you're familiar with the site, you know that the tree coverage in this area, there's pretty substantial trees. Right now we're in leaf-off conditions, so things are a little more bare. But in leaf-on conditions, the signal wouldn't be able to propagate effectively from 50 feet above ground level for a pole in the woods there. It just wouldn't work from an RF standpoint. The 70-foot pole was proffered by the town as an alternative to remedy that problem, and that is because it works from an RF perspective, what AT&T agreed to apply for pursuant to the settlement agreement. So those are, for those who are keeping track, that was 7 different designs that were considered on this site. But the question is why didn't we go somewhere else? Why didn't we consider other locations? And for that, we considered at least 14 total sites that I was able to tally from my time working on the application. If there were informal discussions about other ones, it's possible that there were certainly more. Of course, there's the present site, 465 Old Stone Highway. There's 472 Old Stone Highway, which is the Old Stone Highway Market, which is just a single-story pitched roof structure, so we wouldn't be able to go on the roof. And there's really no room. The parking lot's too small to accommodate a macro site like this. There'd be nowhere to put it, and it would interfere with their existing operations. I'll say for all of these other offsite alternatives, we're just assuming that the landlords would be interested in leasing to us, which from experience we know is certainly not usually the case. But setting aside leasability, all of these alternatives were ruled out for other reasons. Spring School was proffered as an alternative, but it's simply located too far outside of the search ring, which is, of course, the area that AT&T needs to locate a site to remedy this gap in coverage. There was 584 Accabonac Road, which, again, located too far away to the west-southwest outside of the search ring. Camp Blue Bay was proffered, which we explained at the time was a site that was, while it is in an area where AT&T lacks coverage, would not remedy the coverage gap in the vicinity of this site. I'm happy to say that I understand the Camp Blue Bay site was approved and AT&T is going on that tower. And if you look at the propagation maps were provided, you see the projected coverage from that facility. And you see that, as we mentioned several years ago, unfortunately, the coverage we get from that facility doesn't come close to really touching the coverage gap here. So that alternative we actually did pursue, but it doesn't do anything for us in the vicinity of this coverage gap. In addition, during the planning board's deliberations, we received a letter submitting 9 additional sites from one of the members of the planning board that we went out. I've personally visited all of those 9 sites myself, and we submitted a letter that is reproduced in broad substance in the RF and alternative materials that were submitted to you as part of this application. High level, they were ruled out for various concerns, including constructability, environmental concerns, proximity to archaeological resources, threatened and endangered species, and various other avoidance areas under the town's code. With respect to the latest suggestion that we received in the planning memo with respect to small cells, or the alternative small cells plus a macro site. I'll say again, there's just nowhere else for a macro site to go. I'll say, taking a step back, of course, the settlement agreement dictates it's going to be the 70-foot pole or the campanile. But that is not for lack of trying to find alternatives. That is a result of the fact that this board, AT&T, have exhaustively reviewed the alternatives. I flew through them there pretty quickly, but I just listed off 21 different alternatives that you've considered over the last roughly 8 years or so that the application's been with the town in one form or another. So macro sites, this is the site for a macro site. In terms of small cells, why can't we just do a general small cell solution? There's a couple of different problems, practically speaking, when you've got a coverage gap that's this large. One is the sheer volume of small cells you would need to cover a coverage gap of this size makes it a not particularly feasible solution. One of the reasons for that is that small cells are not particularly good at providing broad coverage to residential properties that are set back away from the streets in an area like this where you've got tree heights like you do. So you'd be talking about small utility pole style designs in the roadway that would be abutting trees far larger than them. For the same reason we can't make a 50-foot pole work in these woods, the utility poles there wouldn't effectively propagate from a small cell solution. There's also a practical concern that AT&T requires backup power at its sites in the event of an outage. If, for example, there was to be a natural disaster or a hurricane or something like that, or even just a simple power outage, small cells don't have the backup power supply capabilities that a macro site does. So this site has a 20 kilowatt generator affixed to it, so that in the event of a power outage, if somebody pulls out their cell phone in an emergency and dials 911, or if first responders who rely on the First Responder Network Authority, FirstNet, that AT&T deploys on behalf of Congress in New York State, if they pull that out and go to use it, and we've got small cells deployed, nothing's going to happen because there's not sufficient backup power to power the small cells. Not true of a macro site because we have the generator to support it. So just wanted to touch on that for the benefit of the board. I know the settlement agreement provides the terms that it does in terms of it's this or that, but I wanted, in fairness to the board, to run through the alternatives just to refresh everyone's recollections and to address the small cell solution, because again, the litigation shows, the record shows that all of the alternatives have been exhaustively considered. This is the location that has to be considered because there's simply no feasible alternative. So approximately 8 years of various proposals. There's no alternative or more appropriate site in the vicinity of the coverage gap for AT&T to locate a macro facility. I'm going to take a brief pause there. I know I flew through a lot because I know most of this board has heard all of this from me before. That having been said, any questions before I jump into seeker? I'm going to touch in seeker, just a preview. I'm going to hit on the historic. We can talk about the visual. I'm going to remind everybody about the wetlands, and I'll touch on the species impacts. But anything on what I've just covered before I move on?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I think it's going to be more productive maybe if Randy, you can ask a real quick question, but generally I'd like you to finish your presentation. You'll be in the room, and as we go around, sure, we'll bring those up. But Randy, go ahead with quickly.
Well, on the view that Eric has up, the west elevation. So basically the questions are, you thought 50 feet would work in the campanile, but not when you moved over to the trees. But in that west elevation, there's a note. You see the note there. It says, existing trees in wooded area to be removed as needed. So trying to find some clarity on that. If you're able to and intend to remove the trees, why does the tower have to be 70 feet tall?
Sure, no, so happy to clarify that question. So what that note is in reference to is that there are trees that will be impacted by the access drive and the footprint of AT&T's equipment compound that will be removed. We are not clearing the entire site. You can see the limit, Eric timed it perfectly, the limit of disturbance of what we're proposing to clear there. So we are not stripping out all of the other trees, which will continue to grow on the site. So I hope that answers your question there.
Would you be able to mark the trees over a certain caliper we often do that in applications, just so we can see if which trees you think you're going to need to take down, and whether or not a tweak to the driveway or something could keep some of them up.
My recollection is that there is a tree survey in the file, so I'll take a look
Okay.
at that, and then hopefully I'll have that in hand for the planning board's next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
The other stuff, Ian, I can do.
Yeah, Randy, I do definitely, I'm sure you're going to have comments, and we'll give you your full, I want to hear
Okay.
everything you have to say for sure, but let's just let the applicant finish first, and then we'll, as part of our discussion, go around the table, and we'll come back to whatever, clarifications or questions you have.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to delve into seeker, of course, I know this board is working on an unrelated DEIS right now, so I know you're all experts in seeker at this point and what the requirements are and how all of that works. Again, it's a finding that there's no significant adverse environmental impact would be a negative declaration. A positive declaration is a finding of one or more significant adverse environmental impacts resulting from the project. In this case, a positive declaration under the terms of the settlement agreement is tantamount to a denial and would result in the construction of the Campanile, which received a negative declaration back in, I believe, late 2019, maybe early 2020. The seeker considerations that jumped out in our letter of intent included as exhibits some really detailed materials on the visual side, on the threatened endangered species side, on the wetlands side, just to make a clear record for all of you that we feel very strongly clearly supports a negative declaration. Where I think could be confusing is with respect to the determination of eligibility of the chapel itself. So what does that mean? What happens? What's the impact of that? One thing I want to make very clear is the State Historic Preservation Office prefers the monopole. But if the monopole facility is denied, we would proceed with the Campanile and we would proceed with SHPO and with the FCC pursuant to what's called the Nationwide Programmatic Agreement. The Nationwide Programmatic Agreement is between the FCC and the State Historic Preservation Offices of all 50 states, including New York State. And what that lays out is where the State Historic Preservation Office has determined that a project is in the area of potential effect of a facility, of a eligible or listed structure, such as here. You work through a review process wherein the State Historic Preservation Office and the FCC draft a memorandum of agreement, it's called. In other contexts, you'll hear it called a programmatic agreement, a letter of resolution, all different words for the same thing. It's just a written document that lays out, here's the history of this application, here's what's going on here are the potential impacts, here's how they were mitigated, so that there's a clear record that shows that impacts to historic structures were mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. I will say that one of the reasons post-settlement agreement execution that there wasn't an application more quickly filed by AT&T is because we reached out to the State Historic Preservation Office and we reached out to the FCC to start that process. And where we wound up with the State Historic Preservation Office was having a draft memorandum of agreement ready to go that laid out both options, the Campanile and the 70-foot monopole design. The agreement basically said, you're going to apply for the 70-foot pole. If the town denies that, we understand you're proceeding with the Campanile. So I just don't want there to be a thought that the denial of the 70-foot pole means we can't build the Campanile for some reason. The programmatic agreement makes it very clear how we go about doing that. And again, it wouldn't block us from doing that in any way. What I'll also say is with respect to the determination of adverse impact to the chapel, the planning board's determination is its own. You don't rely on the decision of anyone else, whether it's SHPO or the FCC, to determine whether or not this will have a significant adverse environmental impact on the chapel. We submit that because, as Eric pointed out, this structure is further away from the chapel. Its construction doesn't implicate the chapel in any way. It's set off to the side, which are all the reasons that we understand the planning board prefers it. It is not likely to have a significant adverse environmental impact. And that while it certainly would be visible from the chapel, the visibility alone does not give rise to a finding of a significant adverse environmental impact that would warrant the preparation of an EIS. And the visual simulations that Eric went through, we can pull them back up if the board have questions. There was a balloon float done to get the height right so that we knew exactly how tall this would be. I've described why the height is what it is, why we can't go lower, ignoring the fact that the settlement agreement binds us to the 70-foot height, binds the town to this or the Campanile. That is why the 70-foot pole was the one we applied for. That is why the settlement agreement selected 70 feet. With respect to threatened and endangered species, we provided a really fulsome report prepared by Acer Associates that ran through all potential candidate species in the area, threatened or endangered. And there was a habitat assessment done. We had people out there, boots on the ground, actually confirming no presence of species. The two species I'll touch on is we understand that there is not on site, but within, I can't remember if it's a half mile or so, a bald eagle nest located, as well as always the possibility of the presence of the northern long-eared bat, although known or spotted. And we will continue to coordinate with the Department of Environmental Conservation and U.S. Fish and Wildlife as necessary to ensure no impacts to those. As the board may not be aware, there's general guidance out there about how to avoid impacts to such species, including construction timing, things like that, all of which governed by the DEC, all of which AT&T will comply with. Lastly, I just want to remind the board that there is a wetland located to the north of the facility. The Campanile received a natural resources special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals because it was within 150 feet of that wetland. And also we received a freshwater wetland permit from the DEC for the Campanile because I believe our landscaping for the Campanile was within 100 feet. It was within the adjacent buffer area. So the monopole itself is further away than that. And obviously the town previously approved that the Campanile design, notwithstanding the presence of the wetland. I would submit that it's pretty clear that this would be even less impactful than the Campanile ever could be. And again, the minimal footprint of the facility, this isn't the kind of project where you're going to create excess stormwater runoff that would pose any threat to the wetland or have any of the other kinds of things that you'd be worried about negatively impacting the wetlands. All of that to say, the applications provide hundreds of pages of material that we feel strongly supports a negative declaration pursuant to seeker. We think that there's substantial evidence to support that and that the board would have no problem drawing that conclusion on the seeker side. I just want to close with the standard of review. I said this close to the beginning of my presentation. This is an application that stands on its own. There are implications to the denial, but it's an application that you would review pursuant to the town code, as Eric laid out. It is also subject to the same federal rules in terms of the federal standard. You wouldn't deny an application where there's a significant gap in coverage. It's also subject to the public utility standard in New York, where a utility has shown a need for a facility and that it is a feasible means of remedying the service deficiency. An application should be approved. All of the citations to those are laid out in our letter of intent. I don't want to go back into them, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them on that. So with that, what we would request the planning board to do tonight is resolve to act as lead agency and to circulate notices to the architectural review board, the other involved agency for purposes of the project. And then we would look to come back at your next regularly scheduled workshop meeting, answer any questions that may come up tonight that we're unable to answer on the spot, and work through seeker with the board. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that you can just stay close and we'll begin to go around the board and we'll call you up if we have any questions.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to start with Lou on this.
Yeah, this application, as was noted by the applicant's attorney, has bounced around for 7, 8 years. There have been a lot of different variations that the planning board and other boards have tossed around. I think the presentation made by the applicant's attorney today was the longest argument ever made for the least flexibility by this board in making a decision. So I just want to repeat what was said in Eric's memo, that litigation has resulted in a situation where the town must approve the currently proposed project with acceptable changes or mitigation possible. So I think where we land today is not whether to approve or deny. I mean, we can deny it, but if we deny it, then the Campanile goes up automatically. I think what we're left with is the mitigation part of that statement. And there are some issues that some of which Randy has brought up already with the trees. By the way, you didn't answer Randy's question as to why the original extension of the bell tower was 50 feet and this one needs to be 70 feet.
Yeah, I'll give you a chance to answer that. Yep.
So the RF affidavit, which we can resubmit, it would have been from 2019 or 2020, laid that out. So the answer from the RF engineer was the tree is immediately surrounded on all sides, immediately adjacent by trees, whereas the Campanile has more setback on most of its sides, so it has better propagation characteristics. The monopole surrounded as it is at 50 feet wouldn't work, just from an RF standpoint. So that's a part of the RF record that we've got as a part of this case. I'm not an RF engineer, but that is the testimony of the RF engineers that we have available.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other issues, and I'll just let the other board members go and it'll come, I'm sure it'll come up. The driveway is a big issue in my eyes because it's so visible as you pass by. It's just, and if there are any alternatives to that straight line right to the monopole, that would mitigate the site. Other than that, there's really not much else to discuss in my view. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Lou. Michael.
I agree with everything Lou has said. I'm curious about the northern long-eared bat, and I think our goal is just to mitigate as much as we can this poll, what we can do. I do have another question too. So I'm curious about the bat, and I've read some of this where it says cutting the tree down won't harm the bat, and there are other issues the bat faces. The fence around the generator or whatever other equipment there, is there a way to have that door not face the road? Can it be to the side so that some screening can be put in place? I think that would be pretty helpful.
You want me to?
I would love to hear about the bats because I love bats are great mosquito eaters, and we get great mosquitoes here in the summer, as many places do. So I like bat houses too.
I'm more excited to talk about the bats, so I'll start with the fence question just to address it quickly. We'll look into it. I suspect that the topography of the site played into the access point being chosen as it was, because it is a straight shot from Old Stone Highway. And it may have been also a combination of one of the concerns was tree removal. I'll check with the A&E. We'll take a look at the site plans in advance of the next meeting to see if any other alternative route, something that curves around maybe is more feasible. I'll say that if we do that, it's going to result in an increased area of disturbance overall. Again, it's such a small footprint that the delta probably isn't anything that would trip any major concerns. So we'll take a look at that and see what we can do to address that concern there. On the northern long-eared bat, I'm glad you asked. The northern long-eared bat, the materials go into some of the history here. What's interesting about the bat, among other things, is that the reason its status is being upgraded actually at the federal level from threatened to endangered is not because of habitat loss. It's not because too many trees are being cut down, but because that there is a fungus that affects them that is causing the drop in population. So that is why the way that the mitigation is structured currently is what's called the 4D rule. And the 4D rule says that your removal of certain trees during certain times of the years needs to be limited so that you don't impact any bats that may be roosting or nesting at the time. So the removal of trees generally isn't a problem. You just want to make sure they're not in there when you remove them. And that's what the 4D rule seeks to address. Fish and Wildlife may come out with additional guidance on that as they're considering the northern long-eared bat. And to the extent they do, it would be be followed by AT&T because those would be the rules in terms of how you ensure that you mitigate any impacts to the northern long-eared bat and don't need to go get a permit or anything from Fish and Wildlife or from the DEC. So that's the standard rule for construction across New York State. Whenever you're dealing with the clearing of trees, the northern long-eared bat is very often a concern, and that's how the concern is addressed, is you make sure you're constructing during the right seasons and you're not removing trees when there's a likelihood that the bats will actually be in there.
Well, thank you. You say you're not a RF engineer, but you might be a bat expert. So that's awesome.
Just enough to be dangerous, just enough to quote the Acer Associates memo effectively.
Michael, you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Sharon.
Yeah, I think I'm in the mitigation side of this whole project as well. Somehow if you can soften that frontage on Old Stone Highway with some more country look than this just immediate, line to the tower with a fence. And it just seems, very suburban in some ways. So I think if you, somehow can soften that driveway with maybe some plantings around it and maybe a little curve. I mean, I don't know. We don't want to, knock down a bunch of trees for it, but I think that's the biggest thing at this point, is just making it look as natural as possible.
Thank you, Sharon. And last but certainly not least, Randy.
Thanks, Ian. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just go down my list. Again, with the trees, I know that Matt, is that right?
Yep.
Is that the attorney's name?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Said that they would look at, they think they have a tree map. I think the essence of that would be, I still have a couple of questions about the 50 feet, especially with that tree removal as needed. So is part of the reason AT&T wants a 70, it's actually 60, from reading the submission, it's 67-foot tower at 10 feet of ground elevation. So it's actually 77 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm seeing in the submission. So my question is part of the reason you want a 77-foot tower that you intend to rent space to other carriers?
Yeah, you can answer that. It should be pretty quick. But.
Yeah. On the, I'll just say in response to the tree clearance note, I'll note that we, among I explained why the note's there. There's also the town has clearance restrictions. So we couldn't go and clear all the other trees, even if we wanted to, which we don't. If for no other reason, then it would create even more timing considerations for the northern long-eared bat. With respect to the elevation, if you look at the way that the pole is designed and where the equipment is laid out on it, what you see is that there's really not room for another carrier to go on there. The antennas are flush mounted at two different center line heights, 67 feet, as well as, I believe, 57 feet. So if there's any confusion in the pole height, the pole itself is 70 feet to the very top of the pole. Our antenna center line height at its highest point is 67 feet. And then the town, my recollection, at least from the brush dump application, is that the town determines the height of the facility from above the ground level where the site is located. You don't consider it in relation to, say, the road or sea level or anything like that. So topographic changes on the site don't impact the considerations. But the short answer is there's not an intention to rent out. If you look at the pole itself, and you can see it on this drawing, you can see our antennas, you can see our RRH units mounted to the pole. A carrier looking to go on that would be well below 40 feet, probably around 30 feet. And at that point, you're so deep into the trees, I don't see anyone wanting to take that. The structural analysis that we'll be submitting to the town, I assume, would also show that probably another carrier's loadout probably wouldn't go on the tower. It just wouldn't work from a constructability standpoint. So there's no present intention to lease any space on that pole. And looking at the pole, I don't see any space to lease at this point.
Would you be comfortable with a condition that it was solely for AT&T's use?
I don't think that condition would be lawful under federal law. I don't think we could agree to that. I don't think it would be enforceable if we did. And I don't know that you would long-term want that condition to be in place, because if somebody did come in and go below us, which seems, again, I'll say I don't see that happening for the same reason we can't do it. I don't see anybody else doing it. But if somebody wanted to come in and locate lower on that pole with us, that I think would be a good thing from the planning board perspective, because it means they're not going to go out and build a new pole somewhere else. And I think that, Eric will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that would be a positive under the new wireless code, because co-location, I believe, is now encouraged.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you can also come back to us and request an extension of the pole, right?
Sure. And that would be something that would be considered at that time. I don't believe that the tower is being designed right now to be extendable. Again, the structural analysis will bear that out, but nothing could be done without an application to the town and further proceedings by the planning board, ARB, et cetera. Again, the federal law overlay comes in and it says if another carrier comes along and is looking for a site, that is what it is. It's something the town will deal with at that time with that carrier, should that happen. But I don't believe any condition like that would be lawful. And I don't think AT&T is in a position to agree to that. Again, though, looking at this poll as it's laid out, I don't see it as a concern that's likely to bear fruit.
Okay. The other question again about the trees is, if what you're saying is that you need the 70 feet because the trees interfere with the RFC, but you're also saying that the trees are going to screen the tower. So I think we need more clarity about which trees are not going to be removed.
Right. And so what I think makes sense is for me to look and see if we can find the tree survey that, because I recall the height of tree question came up previously. And so I think we have a tree survey on file, and we'll dig it out. Eric, if you've got the old record, it's in there. I remember seeing it at one point or another. Because when we were looking at the 50-foot pole design, that's the tree survey we were looking at to realize it was a problem. Before I forget, the one other reason why it's 70 feet, the tree issue is there. The design of the facility is flush mounted antennas. So you can see that they are two different center line heights, flush mounted, so that it is as narrow a pole as humanly possible at the request of the town. The alternative would be a more traditional layout of the pole that this board has probably seen before, where it's the much, much larger triangle center line height that has all of the antennas jutting off the pole several feet, which is much, much wider. I don't know realistically what that would result in any decrease in the height of the pole. I'll say again, the settlement agreement binds us to the 70-foot height, but I just want to give the board as much information as possible to understand why it's 70 feet, why that's what was in the settlement agreement, and ultimately bound the parties.
Okay, well that sounds good. But we'll get more clarity on the trees. You mentioned that there's a backup generator proposed, and do you know what type of fuel are you planning to use on that generator?
Sure. So this is a 20 kilowatt diesel generator. I believe it's a Polar model. The Exhibit I to the planning board letter includes the equipment specs for it that lays it out. This is, I believe that the brush dump site had a 30 kilowatt diesel generator. This one is 20 kilowatts, so I believe it's a smaller one. It'll have all the same safety features that the planning board approved for the brush dump site, which includes secondary containment, double hull. It is remotely monitored so that in the event that anything were to happen, alarms would go off and technicians would report immediately to the field and whatnot. Again, and there's other safety information available in Exhibit I, which includes all of the equipment specs for all of the equipment, including the generator.
So normally we have a noise standard at the property line. I haven't heard anything about that yet. But I think we would need to know what the noise will be at those houses that are pretty close. I
Yeah.
assume this generator will be automatically testing itself every 2 weeks, every week?
It's usually every 2 weeks or so. It tests for about an hour where it idles. The noise information is included in the Exhibit I, the equipment specification, so you can see the noise generated by that. I would say that the generator itself, under the wireless ordinance and maybe the general town noise ordinance, but certainly in the wireless ordinance, the operation of the generator at full capacity at kicking on during an emergency is actually exempt from any of the town's noise restrictions.
Well,
Which
I don't know if that may be. I don't know, Eric. Have we looked into whether this meets our noise regulations at the property line?
Yeah, I'm looking at the submission elements that are in Exhibit I, as Matt was referring to. We have a sound output. It's not measured at the exact property line. So I can't confirm that right now for you, but we'll look into it a little bit more.
Eric, can you remind me what the property line noise limit is?
I believe in a residential district, it's 55 decibels average at night.
Okay, do you know what it is during the day?
I believe it's 65.
Okay, so just for reference, at 23 feet away from the generator, assuming that the fence that is going to be installed and assuming the trees don't exist, if you just had the generator on there, what Exhibit I shows is that at full, operation, this generator would be right in the neighborhood of 69 to 70 decibels. Idling, which is the only time it would be subject to the town's noise ordinance, I believe it's actually already at 64. And I see Eric is scrolling to the relevant section, so I'll pause for dramatic effect. But it sounds like at 23 feet away, we are compliant. And then we are, I know, greater than the height of the tower from any of the adjacent property lines. So the noise isn't going to amplify over the distance. It's only going to be deadened more and more. We'll continue to look into it, but I think that Exhibit I has the information that demonstrates compliance for that twice a month testing that would occur. I'll also say that one thing to keep in mind for the generator is, in the event of an emergency, it doesn't actually run 24/7. It runs long enough to charge up the batteries that service the site, and then it kicks off. So it's not a constant cycling of the generator where it's always running. It'll run, it'll turn off for several hours, it'll kick back on again as needed during an emergency. Again, that's exempt from the town's noise ordinance because it's running during an emergency. But just as additional consideration, it's not like this thing just runs during the entire power outage.
Well, is there a way to further mitigate the noise? A building around it, I'm not saying any of these are necessarily going to work, but we've looked at putting them in a concrete vault in underground. We've looked at additional mitigation in a small building around them.
Yeah,
I know I've spent some time on a property next to an emergency generator during an electrical outage, and it's quite loud, and it's quite, especially the people who live right next door to this thing. So I would wonder what more you could do to have that generator not heard by the neighbors. That would be a suggestion. I did notice in the application that the wetland flagging, et cetera, I believe was, the different field measurements were 3 to 9 years old. And I just would ask that we double check how old the wetland flagging is. We're going to declare lead agency. That's not a problem.
You want to make a motion, Randy, for that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. We declare lead agency.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
We have that
Motion
lighting. Okay, pass. We have the lighting fixture that Eric has raised. So we need to get that lighting fixture in compliance with the dark sky ordinance. I think the other things are really landscaping issues. Again, about the trees. If there's a way to, as Sharon said, make that, it's like you've got this historic chapel there, and then right next to it, you've got what looks like a sort of an industrial driveway into this facility. And to the extent we can screen it, I think also we're going to be interested in the type of fence. I don't know from reading the submission, are you proposing right now a chain link fence for?
It's currently proposed as a white board on board fence, which I believe was the preference of the planning department, but I don't want to speak for Eric on that.
I'll leave it to the ARB.
Okay. So
I think that'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, there's flexibility there in terms of the fence design. It was kind of the default is chain link, but we had heard that there may be preference for this, so we just came in with that. And there's also flexibility in terms of the color of the pole. I recall there was a very similar conversation for the brush dump application where it was originally proposed as brown, and the thought was, can we just go with the galvanized steel? Don't paint it because it'll actually be less obtrusive if you just leave it the natural color that it would be. And if that's something this board would like to see, we're open to that as well. That's not an issue to not paint the pole. Sorry to interrupt. I just
no, that's fine. If there's a way, and I hear you about the trees and disturbing the site, if there's a way, I mean, I have seen some driveways designed where there's a small island in the middle, so you would come in around the island, which would have some landscaping on it, and then into the gate, and then you'd come back out around the other side of the island. But it's just one design alternative to consider.
Yep. And we'll take that back and we'll take a look and see if we can make it make sense on the site. It's something we're absolutely going to consider, and we'll be sure to discuss it at the next meeting that we're here with for.
Okay, that's it for me, Ian.
One question.
That's all, Randy? Okay, Michael has one more point.
Question. So how much coverage will this tower provide?
Sure. So if you look at the RF affidavit, which I don't have the exhibit letter memorized like I did the equipment specs, unfortunately, but if you look at that, it's got a table in it that shows non-overlapping coverage. So it doesn't include coverage that overlaps from other sites. It tells you how much new coverage are you actually getting from the proposed facility. And I'll look to see if Neil could bring up even just the small version of it. Eric beat you to it, Neil. So it is on the order of, in terms of in-building, in-vehicle, and outdoor coverage, which are the three kinds of coverage gaps that are here, right? If you're outdoors, even if you hold your phone up in the air, you get no coverage in the vicinity of the site. So this is, I'll just walk through the prop maps one by one, if that's all right, just to.
Michael, unless you really want to dig in, I want to go through this pretty quickly because
Okay.
I'm not
I
sure.
don't really want to dig in. I just want to get
There is a table, yeah. If Eric, if you just want to scroll on down past the maps, that's the before condition as we zoom by, it's existing. That's what we're proposing to do at 700 megahertz. That's the backbone of AT&T's network. These are capacity frequencies, so they provide speed and data. They're not initially intended for coverage. Keep on going. Coverage summary table. So the green is new in-building coverage totals from the proposed site at 700 megahertz. That's the one you're primarily concerned with in terms of coverage. That's how many square miles, that's how many acres you can see there at the centerline heights that we're proposing. You can see then in yellow, that's the in-building vehicle coverage. And the RF affidavit itself also tells you, just in case you're curious, the roadways that are going to be covered by this. It tells you how many thousands of trips a day go down those roads. And it really makes you help appreciate the function of the site. And then the last number there is outdoor coverage. If you're walking around, how much new outdoor coverage is provided by this site.
And let's just stop there because this is all in the file. We're not going to actually vote on much tonight. We're going to take sort of a poll,
Sure.
to see where the board stands. And then if there's still questions, Michael, you can go review this and we can bring it back up.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to get a sense of.
Yeah, no, I know. I totally. I'm not trying to cut you short at all. I just I don't understand RF, but I know it's in depth and we can go a long while. Okay, that leaves me. I think that there's nobody who's super excited about this project, as the public and the applicant know. This board did sign a settlement agreement. I don't think Michael was on the board, but the majority of the current board did. Randy is an exception, so I don't want to lump him with the rest of us. I personally signed that, and I did it because I thought it was in the best interest of the town, not based on my own personal opinion of whether I wanted to see either of these options or any tower there at all, but because of what I thought the reality and the law, and based on advice that we had. I thought that it was in the best interest of the town to do that. Considering that settlement's in place, it's been made clear by the planning department, by the applicant, that I don't think we have a ton of options here, even though we're going an hour and 15 minutes now of talking about them, which I'm not trying to make light of that. I think it's important that everybody understands this process. I'm in favor of this. I do think, considering the situation, I am very pleased that the town board, the planning department has been working with Cityscape. I hope we can have better cell coverage in this town with very minimal aesthetic impact. I'm no expert there, but hopefully those days are getting closer. We're getting closer to that goal. So long story short, I think that this is, frankly, I'm fairly agnostic about the design. I've been on the board the whole time where different boards and different configurations thought the pole was better, the campanile was better. But clearly this board, in whatever configuration, has led us here. And we explicitly preferred this to the campanile, litigated it, and now we're here. So I think that is the path forward. I do think this board has brought up a lot of really good points about mitigation and how to make this the best plan it can be if it is going to go forward, and that's not totally clear yet. As far as the pole color and the fence, I do defer to the ARB on that. I think that they can decide. I don't want to pull you in different directions. They are the experts there. You definitely have to fix the lighting, as you know. A couple of things I want to bring to the board again is consensus. The driveway, I do think it would be good. It is pretty visually impactful to have the driveway go straight in. If there's a way to minimize tree cutting, well, first of all, I think that as you're saying, you're going to minimize it whatever you can. But with that in mind, if we could have a curved driveway that allowed for some screening in front of that fence, I think it would be a good idea, not only to screen the fence, but also just limit, how much pole is visible. I've been by the site. Frankly, I wasn't totally looking at that. I don't think it'd be a good trade-off if you had to cut down 3 times as many trees or whatever. But would the board agree that if they could sort of have the driveway configured so that would allow to go around and screen in front of that fence, you would like that option?
Yeah.
And I think this should be considered.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give the applicants something that they can look at to come back with us. Frankly, Randy, I always appreciate your opinions. I don't think I'd favor the islands idea because I think it's only going to work from one angle. And if you're driving right by, if you look, 90 degrees, it would help, but otherwise might not be. I think a curved type of situation with the screen would be better. I also just want to mention the condition of other carriers. I totally get where Randy's coming from to make sure that we're not having an extra high pole here unnecessarily or as a back door to rent space. I would not be in favor of that condition, though, for the reasons the applicant said. If technology changes, it seems like it would be counterproductive, and I do take it, the applicant at their word, that that's not why the height is what it is. And frankly, I think that the height is in the settlement agreement, so if we had that condition, it doesn't help anything because the tower is not being lowered unless they volunteer it. Lastly, generator noise. I think that's always a good point and something we talk a lot about. Based on your preliminary comments and Eric's, it sounds like it's probably not an issue. I think if you meet our code, I wouldn't ask you to do anything more than that. I do think it would be to your benefit to show us that you meet the code, even though you've given us an indication you think that's the case. With that, I'll just go down to the questions really quick. We declared lead agency. Any other changes to screening, landscaping, fencing? I think we've kind of talked about that. We've given you some things to work with. Lastly, does the planning department, does the planning board want the planning department to prepare an EAF parts 2 and 3 for the next work session?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Okay. So, Randy, do you agree with that, or?
You mean part 2 and 3 being
the EAF part 2? So basically, I think that's what's leading us to a negative declaration.
right.
Well, I mean, we'd have to see what it says, but that's the.
Yeah. I think this is an inappropriate site. So
That's
I don't.
fair enough. There's no need to go through the.
Yeah. I'll just I'll speak up about what I think the impacts are. Let me just say in quickly the benefit of an island is that you can plant directly in the line of sight from the road to the facility, but I'm sure they'll figure that out.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% with that. I was just suggesting maybe I was unclear. If the driveway could curve around and sort of come in from more to the side, you could achieve that same goal, but maybe a broader swath of trees that would block it from multiple angles as you're approaching down the road from the direction. But I trust the applicant will come back in good faith and try to give us the best option based on all of these comments. I don't want to prioritize mine above anybody else's. But generally speaking, I think we'll wrap it up with that. It sounds like we have 4 members who are, tentatively, supportive of this, or at least want to see the next step. And we look forward to seeing you next meeting.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the board's time.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 219-221 Pantago Road. This actually was on recently for a and it's back on tonight just for a procedural matter. I'm recused on this application. I'm not going to leave because I think it's going to be brief, but I'm going to ask Ed to take the lead on this.
Okay. All right. So this really is just a very brief housekeeping item. So Eric, I don't think we'd even need to do a run through of the project.
And no, I don't think that's necessary. This is just correcting a formality and oversight from the last time it was reviewed where the planning board did not declare lead agency status for the project, which, should have been handled as just administerial business at the last meeting. So we recommend that the planning board declare lead agency under SECRA.
Exactly. So we're just we're catching up, basically. There's an EAF that's been prepared. We'll probably talk about it at a future work session. So in advance of that, we'd like to move to request lead agency. So I'll move that we do that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
Abstain?
And any negative? No? Okay. Passed and carried. We're done.
Well, thank you for that, Ed. Next item on the agenda is Sylvan Realty, LLC.
Sure. So I just X'd out the visual, but I'll get that up for you in a second. Here we go. So basically the only remaining outstanding item as far as actual completeness of the submission package for a site plan was an issue related to lighting, exterior lighting, the location of the fixtures, and some details were not provided. As you can see on this elevation plan, the applicants have corrected that and illustrated where all the exterior lighting is proposed. Each fixture is compliant with the town code and the planning board's guidelines for exterior lighting. So the planning department finds the lighting acceptable. The board should determine if it agrees. We do make a note that the ARB has reviewed the proposed project on 2 occasions. Although further revisions may be required, the planning board should ultimately make ARB approval a condition of site plan, special permit approval, should it choose to grant it. Basically what we're saying there is that the fact that they are not complete in front of the ARB should not hold up the site plan process in front of the planning board. So just one other item to mention, the Chief Fire Marshal has found the application to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So therefore, the application appears to be otherwise complete. The planning department prepared and attached to our memorandum an EAF parts 2 and 3 with a negative declaration pursuant to SECRA and chapter 128 of the town code recommended. The board should review that document and determine if it wishes to accept it. If it does, then the application is complete and ready to be scheduled for a public hearing.
Thank you, Eric. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Richard Whalen from Whalen Farlow, PL.
Vice Chair.
That's right, acting chair, vice chair.
Fair enough.
Richard Whalen from Whalen Farlow, PLLC, represent the applicant. Sylvan Realty, the principal, Rick Van Scoten, is here tonight. Also Dave Brown and Dan Peterson from Bowler Engineering. Not much to say, I guess. Obviously, we would appreciate if you agree with the planning department that the application is complete and ready to be scheduled for hearing. The one thing I do want to bring to your attention is the one we've been before, as Eric said, we've been before the ARB 2 times. So you have the last in front of you. You have the architectural plans, which were the previous plans before that we showed to the ARB the last time. They thought the white fascia of part of the building, what they called the tower, was too prominent. We had a widow's walk on the top. So those things are coming off, and I wanted to show you, I think in the packet that you do have one depiction.
I think that might be it.
Yeah, well, so that's what the ARB saw the last time, and you should have this one. Do you have this also?
Well,
January 14th. But anyway, we have renderings that I just want to hand around. Again, these haven't been submitted to the ARB yet, but I want you to know what it would look like.
I don't think we should take them here tonight.
All right.
I'm not sure it's going to affect the discussion. I'm sorry, sir. Just because we generally don't accept submissions, and
Okay.
I'm not sure it's going to be.
All right. But you will notice if Eric shows you. You want to bring that back up again, Eric? With the,
Sure. This is probably the best overall.
You should have in your packet, this is a January 14th document. What was shown to the ARB was January. So
Thing is gone.
the building will become, I don't know, plainer. The white will be removed. The widow's walk along the edge will disappear. The overall height of the building with the widow's walk removed, the overall height is only 29 feet. Remember that 35 feet is allowed in a commercial
Nice.
from a commercial building. So anyway, that's the only remaining thing. We'll go back to the ARB probably after you've granted your approval, and hopefully we'll get them to, we're going to be responsive to their concerns.
Thank you very much.
All right.
With that, this is Sharon's.
Yeah. It sounds like the housekeeping, lighting, all those things have been cleaned up. And if Eric thinks the lighting is fine, then I'm sure it is. I've gone through the EAF and I pretty much agree with how this has been spelled out with just those 2 items, which are really more related to intensity of use and maybe some traffic, increased traffic are moderate. Otherwise, they're small to no impact at all. So I'm pretty much in agreement with the way Eric has done this environmental assessment form.
Okay, great. And actually, while we're on that point, I didn't want to rob Sharon of her, it's her application. But we normally go through the EAFs, part 2 and 3 as a group. Sam has talked about previously, maybe focusing on the points that might be contentious, and I would like to do that. I definitely want to make sure we if that document is adopted, that it's what this board wants, even though the planning department helped us prepare it. So if anybody has any comments at all, either on part 2, where we have the check boxes about no or big impacts, or part 3, where it then further explains the project and how, any mitigation efforts might be in play. So I guess, why don't we just pause our overall conversation? We'll go around the table really quickly on that one issue. Sharon has spoken. Michael, do you have any thoughts about the EAF?
Nothing to add.
Ed?
I don't, no.
Lou?
Yeah, I thought number 3, we should discuss a little further. I don't have strong feelings for either side of that question, but I think it's something that I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't check off that no box. I think that's something that might definitely impair the character and quality of the existing community, given that it's in a residential neighborhood, the size of the building, going 2 stories. So I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks about that.
Well, so what is there now is my question.
Well, right now it's a 1-story, pretty dilapidated building.
Okay.
And
Nightclub.
Nightclub.
Ian, is it possible to have the EAF up on the screen? I don't.
I don't know, Eric. Yeah, if Eric can do that, great. One thing I want everybody to keep in mind here, though, is if we do check any boxes that say moderate to large impact, that's part 2 of this form. Part 3 then explains why those may or may not be important. So if we check this as moderate or large, we have to make sure that if you intend to do a negative declaration, I don't know anybody's intention, that we then explain why those impacts are in fact, mitigated and not important. So we have to do this as a complete document, and there's a, 2-page part 3 here that will have to pair with this. So, yeah. I just don't want to, I want to be careful about focusing too much on just these check boxes because it's only maybe not even half the story. Eric is trying to pull it up.
Yeah. Yep. There you go.
So the traffic, I think, is probably the
Right.
and that's checked as moderate to large. So,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
traffic.
Can I just make a comment there?
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. I agree with that. And actually, I did have the same thought that Lou did. Is if there was anyone that I would question, it would have been number 3. But I think that the traffic is the key issue
Mhm.
around that, and that is checked as moderate to large impact. I really gave this quite a bit of thought, in terms of the non-traffic issues of the existing community and its character. And I do think, that even while there are abutting residences that are on Springs Fireplace Road, that this side of the road is largely commercial all the way up to Oakview Highway. So, I think it was a good call to question it, but I'm feeling like the impact will actually be small.
And I tend to agree only because I think the project right now is more intense on nighttime, activity, and this moves it to daytime activity, which is actually a bit of an improvement.
Yeah, good point.
Mhm.
Michael, you have any thoughts on that line?
I agree with Sharon.
Randy, I guess.
on 3, Ian,
Yeah, on 3.
I'm okay with it where it is.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Randy.
I did have a question about drainage problems, number 10, when we get down there.
Well, we're not going through line by line, so I guess,
Okay.
I just to wrap up number 3, I guess I would be the 4th vote to say leave it where it is. So that will remain. And then, yeah, go ahead, Randy. You can say what you would like about any other item.
It's a question with Eric. Do we have a full-blown drainage plan that keeps all of the roof, parking lot, everything on site?
Yes,
And-
there's a comprehensive site drainage plan with watersheds illustrated and calculations prepared by a licensed engineer that demonstrates that they can meet the code and contain all runoff on site.
Do you think we should have our own engineer take a look at it, or?
Our engineer, as you know, the town doesn't currently have an in-house town engineer. We have a consulting engineer. Their services are reserved for very unique situations. It has been the recent practice of the planning board basically to, rely on the, professional license of an engineer that submits plans to this board on behalf of the applicants. To, to assume that the calculations are valid based on the fact that their license is at stake if they misrepresent that. So I feel that the information submitted is adequate, but it is something you can ask for.
Yeah, no, I think I tend to agree with you. As long as they're meeting our drainage code requirements. The only other thing I have is 8, and it's not so much. It's a question of, I don't know how we can finally. One of the big issues here has been the way this looks, and given that we don't have a final elevation, especially the elevation, I think, from the south. We do, it's being changed we don't know what the final one is going to look like. I don't know that we have all the information we need.
I would say I understand your point. I would say, though, I think that if you are going to have that discussion as relates to one of these questions, it would probably be more appropriately pointed at number 3, which is the character of the community, simply because number 8, it really, even though those are terms that have sort of a, colloquial definition, it's really pointed at identified, specific resources. Historic being resources that have been identified as historic, whether they be on the eligible list or the National Register. Archaeological resources being something that you would find through an archaeology study. And then architectural or aesthetic resources, really you're getting at something along the lines of a scenic area of statewide significance. In the case of this property, none of those apply. It's not within any of those areas. So I believe I understand your concern and the question, but I think it would probably be more appropriate to direct that concern to the answer that you give for item number 3 on this document.
Well, see, I might not think it will impair the character or quality of the community once we have an elevation that looks good. And what we're being told, there are some significant changes that we haven't seen yet.
Well, to be clear, I think that has been submitted, right? We just don't have it, or has it been?
It hasn't been submitted to you because, excuse me. Richard Whalen again for the applicant. We haven't resubmitted to the A or B, so I don't think we've submitted to you. Now, we can do that prior to the public hearing. We can show you the new elevations, and personally, I think they look very good. Obviously, I'm biased,
but they won't have been approved by the ARB yet.
no,
Right.
because your approval will be conditioned on their approval.
Yeah.
But I think since we're going to show that to the A or B, I think it makes sense for us to show it to you before the hearing.
Mhm.
So we're happy to submit that.
Well,
Those are elevations.
beyond that, we're going to have to make sure that that's the plan attached to the public hearing, so that the public is looking
Right.
at the right.
Well, you
so-
won't be doing hearing the resolution tonight, I don't think.
No, not tonight. No.
Yeah.
But I just mean when this is noticed, make sure the plans that are referenced include the plans that you
Yeah.
now are proposing.
So we'll submit that to you this week.
Yeah.
Or before
And
next.
so I would, in absence of plans, I would tend to agree with Lou, but so I don't really know what to do with that one.
Well,
I keep,
Not really.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand the objection, but I do think there's this dance that we do where the A or B is looking at aesthetics, we're looking at community character and other features. This is going wrong in parallel streams. I don't think the changes that are mentioned would lead me to change my mind on the EF part 2 or 3. And there's, I think, at least 3 other votes that feel the same as any of those votes. Disagree?
No, I agree with you, Ian.
So then, Randy, I think it's a good point. Noted. We're definitely going to see these plans. We'll make sure that's what's attached that the public sees. But I think regardless, even if you wanted to change it, I think we would move forward with it as is. Unless you have any other comments about that, Randy, or any other items? Nope. Okay. I guess I think I skipped Ed about if you have any comments specifically about the EAF part 2 and 3 besides what's already been discussed.
No, I did comment, actually.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So I think we solved that. So,
Can I just ask, just to take tally of that, are there changes to this page?
I think no changes.
No change.
Changes. Yeah.
No changes. And then I just wanted to get that out of the way and go around the board, but I'll, go back to Sharon.
Mhm.
If there's anything else that you'd like to say.
Nope. I'm good.
Any other board members have anything to add? Okay, the questions are important here. Does the board find the amended lighting plan acceptable?
Yes.
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 If Eric likes it, I like it.
What's that, Randy?
If Eric likes it, I like it.
There you go. Randy's in. And then based on our analysis of the EAF part 2 and 3, should we make a negative declaration, Sharon?
Yes, we should make a negative declaration. Do I need to do that
Just
officially?
make a motion, yep.
Make a motion to make negative to negative declaration.
Second?
Second.
Secret.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'll abstain from that.
Okay, pass and carry. And with that, I think that application is, well, no, ready to be scheduled for public hearing?
Yes, it is.
Everybody agree?
Aye.
Maybe not Randy?
Yep.
Well, it can't be ready if we're not making a negative declaration, so, but pass and carry regardless, or not pass and carry, but consensus is, it's ready.
Yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda,
Yep,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Maidstone Acres 2.
Sure. So developments as of the last time that the board saw this, which was in May of last year. By resolution, the ZBA upheld the building inspector's determination that the on-site activities, specifically the operation of numerous catering businesses, represented the addition of separate principal uses. Accordingly, such activities should cease immediately, and the planning board should not approve any site improvements associated with or which may facilitate such operations. The building inspector's determination identifies on-site catering operations for the on-site restaurant as an otherwise permitted accessory use. However, it does not require that the planning board approve any structures such as loading areas, trailer storage areas, or parking, which would be used in conjunction with this accessory use. Given the obvious constraints of the property that have already been discussed at length, the planning department recommends that the site plan be amended to remove any such structures, or should the applicants continue to propose them, that such an application ultimately be denied by the planning board. So there was an issue the last time that you reviewed this about the building coverage, where the plans identified that they were over by 2 square feet. That represents 0.02 I spoke with the building department, as is customary. You know, obviously this is something you could draw out. You could say, well, you know, if they're over by 1/1000%, you know, that they would need a variance. But it was the consensus of the planning department and the building department that this is negligible and doesn't represent an overage under the town code. So I feel that that is a moot point. I will say, though, that it does look like the total lot coverage that's represented on the site plan may be a discrepancy. But that also may be a moot point, depending upon how the board chooses to go, given the other issues that I'm going to address. So the applicants have submitted a sanitary plan for the site, and you could hopefully see it now on the screen. That includes upgrading the sanitary system. As a reminder to the board, the property is required to be upgraded to a modern sanitary system at this time, as the existing system consists of large capacity cesspools. This upgrade is required irrespective of any site plan application. The submitted plan does not provide test hole data identifying the depth of groundwater. It does not provide existing and proposed grades. At this time, the incompleteness of the sanitary plan and the potential discrepancy of the total lot coverage figures, given those, it is impossible to tell if the outdoor seating area, which is a brick and sand patio with benches and stockade fencing, would even be feasible, both in terms of being able to be safely designed and if relief from the ZBA would be needed. The planning department notes that under the town code, a provision for temporary outdoor seating areas exists via an administrative process, the administrative outdoor dining application and permit. The planning department recommends that the board not approve any permanent outdoor seating areas at this time, and that any future outdoor seating on this property be approved through this administrative process, which notably requires a yearly application, review, and inspection. At the time of the last review, the planning department had detailed the outstanding items still required. The site plan, the following items remain unaddressed. The site plan, as you can see here, if you look on the right-hand corner, identifies the application name as Rita Cantina. The application name is Maidstone Acres 2. And the parking calculations were to be revised to properly identify existing and proposed parking. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner, that revision has also not been performed. So in conclusion, the application is incomplete. The applicant has requested and received 3 extensions or adjournments since the time of the last review in May of 2022. Relatively basic site plan elements, including a proper title, remain absent. The ZBA's determination since the time of the last review prohibits the operation of catering operations for businesses or uses not already approved for the site.
Although the board may wish to discuss this with council and obviously may disagree with the planning department's assessment, the department recommends the following specific requirements of the applicants and course of action by the planning board. First, the applicant should amend the site plan to remove all proposed accessory structures from the site plan with exception of the walk-in coolers. This includes This includes but is not limited to outdoor patios and seating areas, trailer storage areas, outdoor storage areas, employee parking areas, grills, fencing, and exterior lighting. Second, the applicant should amend the site plan to provide the proper application title. Next, the applicant should amend the parking calculation, again, as already required by the board. Then the planning board should give the applicants no more than 30 days to complete these tasks. Once a complete submission is received, the planning board should schedule the application for a public hearing and subsequently render a determination within 62 days, which is what is mandated by the town code. Alternatively, should the applicants not wish to amend the site plan as recommended by the planning department by removing outdoor seating areas and trailer parking, etc., then the board should discuss whether or not it has enough information to properly evaluate the potential impacts of the proposal at this time, and in turn deem the application complete and ready to be scheduled for a public hearing. Should this option be exercised, the planning department recommends that the application ultimately be denied based on its potential adverse impacts to the surrounding neighborhood regarding traffic, circulation, noise, and other issues, which would result from the addition of structures and uses which would permit an intensification of use of the property.
Well, thank you, Eric. Would the applicant like to be heard?
Good evening, members of the board. We were put on very short notice of this. We were notified last week on Thursday of this a hearing tonight, or this that it was rescheduled again. Quite frankly, some of this is news to us. As far as amending the site plan, we will comply with any requirements of amendments that Mr. Shantz has delineated. However, as the board may or may not know, there is an Article 78 that is pending with respect to the determination of the ZBA. That is pending. The town has just responded to that Article 78, and now there is a reply due with a future court date. The applicant did agree to an adjournment of the town's time to respond to that Article 78 in an effort to allow the time ample opportunity to collect the record from the zoning board determination. So that matter is being litigated at this time. As far as the issue with trailers, I mean, I think we long determined and indicated the same to the zoning board that there are no trailers being parked at the property, and there is no intention to park trailers there in the future. What was proposed was on-site parking in order to alleviate the concerns both of this board, and then subsequent to this board, the zoning board of appeals had a significant issue with parking. They made it very clear that on the night of our zoning board application, with respect to the appeal of the decision of the building department, that they had grave concerns about parking and the catering operations effect on parking at the property. Unfortunately, as we all know, there's very limited options as far as parking is concerned with respect to the restaurant and establishment that has been there for, I think we figured out, roughly 60 years. Inherently, the size and location of the property causes a parking problem that we submit to this board and we submitted to the zoning board is not increased or decreased at all by the catering operation. So I would like some clarification as far as what is required, or again, why we are talking about trailer parking when again, I believe we had discussed that previously, and it was more for parking spaces in an existing driveway. Existing dirt driveway with respect to trying to alleviate, we figured if we could put 4 spots on the site versus having no spots on the site, that would at least alleviate some of the parking issues that are currently inherent to the location. In reviewing the site plan, you could see the structures literally go to the edge of the property line. So there's not a lot of room at this location to even manage parking off-site. The off-site parking has always been used at this location. So as far as amending the plan to deal with any, or amending any deficiencies in the plan, I mean, I can tell the board, absolutely tonight, we have no problems issuing or amending. What we did request adjournments for was not for, further amendments to the site plan, but the big issue the last time we were here, as Mr. Shantz indicated, was the large capacity cesspool system, which has taken a significant amount of time. The application is into the health department. We are waiting for the commentary from the health department because the applicant had to create a low nitrification system or low nitrogen system that was not in existence, was not pre-approved by the health department. So the health department, Suffolk County Health Department has various components that they have approved for the low nitrogen systems. This particular property, based upon the unique nature of the site itself and the existing sanitary system that is there that will be removed, required literally a new type of system, not type, I'm sorry, but componentry. So the applicant, along with their engineer and their architect, has been going back and forth since May of last year with the health department with respect to creating a low nitrogen system based upon the approved componentry. So at this time, that's submitted to the health department. We are awaiting their formal comment. We expect, based upon our conversations with the health department, that there may be some variances that are required at the health department. In addition, the applicant is going to have to, based upon the proximity of the system to existing well waters, there's going to be a notification to the adjoining residential property owners asking them if they would be willing to allow the applicant to pay for an upgrade to connect to town water in order to alleviate the requirement of further variances from the health department for the installation of the low nitrogen sanitary system that is going to be eventually put at the site. So that's kind of where we are along this process. And again, I apologize to the members of the board, but I was on vacation last week when we received the notification of tonight's hearing. So with respect to some of the things Mr. Shantz indicated as far as, denial of the application, if we fail to remove certain things in conjunction with what a decision from the zoning board came from when we're appealing, or I'm sorry, had filed an Article 78 on that application. I respectfully am not prepared to comment on that aspect of that at this time because, we are in the process of, we haven't even completed our submissions yet for the Article 78 of the Zoning Board of Appeals decision on the upholding of the decision of the building department. So I must admit that I apologize to the board that, because I was away last week and again, received notice by email on Thursday of last week of tonight's appearance, I am not prepared to comment specifically on the removal of certain things that Mr. Shantz has put on the record with respect to the removal based upon a decision from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I apologize to the board, but I am not prepared for that. And again, I would say it may be a little premature at this time for me to even comment on it when we have an open submission to the Supreme Court with respect to the Article 78 on that matter.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else?
Just any questions?
We may have them, and I think that we'll do is we'll go around the board and individually, and if anybody has any questions for you, just stay close.
I apologize. Yes. James Vlahadamas of Vlahadamas and Hillen LLP, the attorneys for the applicant.
Oh my, I'm in trouble with Jody. I have not done that all night long. There you go. Sorry, Jody. Sorry, Sam.
I apologize.
My fault. Ed, this is your application?
It is, yes. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the problems here have been since the beginning of our discussion about this, right? Two things have been a primary concern for most of us on the board. One is the uses issue, right? The ZBA has made their determination. I know you have an Article 78. You're challenging that determination, but I'm happy that it's moving along. And clearly, the other thing was putting in an IA system and getting rid of the cesspools. I mean, obviously, that's very important. But Eric, I wanted just to clarify this with you. The issues around the site plan, the notion of removing all other additional accessory structures except for the cooler, which we've agreed is a de minimis amount of additional coverage, 0.02% or whatever it is. Is that as a result of the ZBA's determination, or is that purely a coverage issue?
That is purely a recommendation of the planning department. The zoning board's decision was whether or not to uphold a determination of the building inspector with regard to activities on the site and whether or not you could have outside businesses operating a catering operation as an accessory use. So I apologize if there was any confusion with that, but the scope of what the ZBA determined and what is being challenged right now is limited to that issue. And I can elaborate on this too after if the board has questions or after you've gone around to the members, but that is a recommendation of the planning department that I feel is well founded, and I can give you the reasons for it.
Right. So the removal of those additional accessory structures has nothing to is not really directly related.
No, it's not as though the zoning board made a finding that said they must remove these.
Okay.
One quick point of clarification. I think it wasn't only that they're not allowed to have outside catering. It's that what they have is in fact outside catering, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's because I think that's the important part of it is that what was determined by the ZBA.
Yeah.
Or the building inspector first and upheld by the ZBA, that the catering that's happening is not associated with the, which is.
And to be clear also, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the ZBA's decision also does say that, if you have an existing restaurant use or business on site, that catering, and this was based on the building inspector's determination, an accessory catering operation in conjunction with that on-site restaurant is permitted. It's not a prohibited accessory use. So you can have catering as an accessory function of an approved on-site business or restaurant. The discrepancy between the activities assumed to be occurring on the site and what the code permits is that there was more than one accessory catering operation for that existing business.
And so that was the building inspector, ZBA upheld, and now it's being challenged, but that's where we stand right now. Sorry.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear, Eric, about whether or not the department's recommendation to remove those additional accessory structures was what that was related to, and that's
it was
really
not mandated by the ZBA.
All right. So that's really, and it's just best practice in your sense,
I mean, I could come up and elaborate on why we make that recommendation, but I don't know, if you want me to wait or.
I think fundamentally, I don't want to jump ahead, and I'm going to wait for most of my comments, but this has been going on a very long time. We said from the start, it's as a result of code violations. It started before last season. We gave you several, chances at 30-day, and gave you some extensions. So now that we're going into the next season, I think that the planning department, and I would certainly agree that this is something that should be resolved so that you're not operating for another season with violations. I'm going to stop there, but I think that fundamentally that's where it's coming from, is that I think we're trying to wrap this up one way or the other so that whatever you're allowed to do, you do, but there's not this gray area, because I think we're in a very bad spot right now, and I understand some of the delays. I'll say more about that later, but
that's exactly where I was headed actually with that.
Sorry.
That's okay. It was just trying to determine, the basis on which we're asking for these amendments to the site plan. And I totally concur with Eric on that and agree with what Ian just said. We can't drag this into another season and be in gray area once again. We cannot. So I totally support this idea of amending the plan to remove all the other accessory structures. And I think the suggestion that's been made about, moving to the administrative process for permission to get outdoor dining is the way to go as well.
I will say this, I am a little confused as to what accessory structures. So if the board can recall, we came here because there were code violations for pre-existing structures that were modified without a permit. So you had the fence, you had the walk-in box that was moved. Other than that, there was nothing
But
else.
there's no approvals for the items listed. They were added as part of the process because you had to appear because of those code violations. So you don't have the outdoor seating the patio is not permitted. You're right, that wasn't what drew it, but once you come to site plan, we look at all of the things. I don't want to go back and forth too much, but I do want to give you a chance to respond to everybody.
Sure.
So, keep that in mind. I'm not going to cut you short, but let's let Ed finish, and then we'll go around.
I'm going to leave it at that.
Lou?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see this is that, this restaurant was operating before the current ownership in a quiet manner. It sort of flew under the radar. When the new ownership took over, it started to have a higher profile that caused people to complain, that led to violations, that led to a site plan review, and the site plan review opened up a whole can of worms. The biggest one was the sanitary system. And I remember when you first appeared before us, that wasn't even something in your focus at all. It was our bringing it up that caused you to investigate further. And there's serious questions now, after you've consulted the county health department, that you could even put in an IA system because of depth of groundwater and so forth. We'll find out. I know that's still uncertain, but there are serious questions about that. You said yourself that you may need variances from the county.
Correct. However, there's no question that an IAS system is feasible at the site. So I don't want to represent to the board that it's not feasible.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
The other thing that came up through this whole review is the parking. I mean, there is no parking. There's
Right.
zero parking. So you have a very busy restaurant with no parking in a residential zone. So these are very serious questions. And then it was further exacerbated by having this second use. And I know we're arguing now, and there's an Article 78 as to the decision about that. But that's another problem that came up. So you can see how when all of these things are presented to us, it just seems like a jumble of mess, all of which doesn't comply with the code. So right now, I don't know where we stand, except that I don't see any alleviation of any of these problems. So any resolution to any of these problems. So those are my comments.
Michael?
I have nothing to add. My fellow board members have articulated the issues clearly.
Sharon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can do much about the parking, and I think that's like probably a grandfathered in situation. But we can take Eric's recommendations and try to clean the site up a little bit, which is the outdoor seating, and whatever he is suggesting, I think will go a long way in making this a friendlier place for the neighborhood. I mean, I think that's where we're at right now, is trying to protect the residential area right there. And I guess the catering business maybe doesn't bring in traffic, but it does bring in activity and noise when you're coming in and out of the site. And so, you just have to try to find a way to be a good neighbor at this point.
Anything else? Randy?
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. I see there's another note here, indicates location of existing light fixture. All fixtures to be upgraded to dark sky compliant. So we have a septic system that needs attention, and maybe the lighting needs attention. I don't know what phase, but otherwise I think what Eric's suggesting makes sense. That's it.
Thank you, Randy. I just want to make sure of one thing. Nancy, I don't mean to put you on the spot here at all. But as far as this 0.02% coverage in the planning department and building inspector's opinion, you don't have any problem with that, right? Leaving that as an okay?
Yeah, no, I
Just
know,
wanna
like
make
in
sure.
the past, like
Great.
if it was a variance less than 6 inches, they
Perfect.
always just, you know, it's so
Just-
minimal. It's,
I just don't want to, I don't want to do anything wrong here. I want to cover my
That's
bases. So, look, I agree with the previous comments too. You know, as I said, the first time you came before us, you guys have had a restaurant there, or the restaurant has been there for a long time. You have a right to do that. I was pretty agnostic. I didn't want to be judgmental about what you were trying to do or what your intentions were. But this has been going on a very long time. And you eloquently said what some of the delays are, but there is a path forward here. I mean, frankly, the big problem is the septic, and Lou's right. I think he brought that up. Randy brought that up. We all care about it. Turned out you needed to upgrade. But now we have a septic plan that I get is not approved, but there's no grading associated with it. So we can't look at the site plan you're proposing without elevations. You know, I think, I don't know if you were when I met at the site, but I went to the site.
Yes, I wasn't there.
Yeah, and there, you know, there's hills. So this is kind of almost, I don't mean to be disparaging, but it's almost theater to say we're looking at the site plan that may not be consistent with how that system is installed. It doesn't make any sense, and there's probably no way to square all those things. The parking spaces, if there's a retaining wall that's required or something, I don't know if it will be. Frankly, I think it's been your job to show us what's required to accommodate that septic. Maybe you're trying to wait for approval first, but again, with the 30-day time limits we've given you, now going back, you know, almost a year and before last season, I'm sympathetic of business owners, you know, operating in the area. I don't have any problem with restaurants or other businesses if you're doing the right thing, but I do think it's wrong to, considering the comments and considering the violations you have, to go through another season unresolved. I think that you owe it to the community, frankly, to try to fix this or come to some sort of resolution before the restaurant reopens. And I think that's possible. I think that you should, I agree with Eric's comments that there are some, and you even alluded to it too, there are some fairly minor things that triggered having to come before us, which kind of opened up a can of worms, mostly the septic, but other things as well. We can't look at outdoor seating. We can't look at parking spaces. And frankly, if we approve the parking spaces that are at a different grade than would then be required if you had to do some kind of retaining wall, you would be forced to come back and reduce parking, which you're not going to be allowed to do. So I'm not trying to help you there, but it just doesn't make sense from a planning standpoint to try to look at all of these changes and ignore the fact that the septic, we don't know the elevation, you know, the grades. It's not a reasonable idea. So what I think you should do is listen to the planning department. Nothing says that you can't try to clean this up, get to a point where you resolve those, what you know, everybody was saying were sort of minor violations, resolve those, get to a truly complete application, including the title. I know that's not a huge deal, but you have to understand that, you know, having multiple extensions, maybe for good reason, but if you don't fix that, it's not a great look, and it doesn't give us, you know, peace of mind that this is trying to be pushed along as fast as possible. So I think you should fix the title. I think you should, you know, do the cooler, all of those minor things that you came to before, you know, originally, and try to come back to us with that. And frankly, I also think there's nothing that should stop you within 30 days of showing elevations that, you know, should your septic be approved, you just said very, you know, forcefully that you think it will happen. Maybe there's some tweaks, but they're probably not going to lie, you know, in serious elevation or grading changes beyond what you would show us now. So show us those things. I would hate for this to go into the beginning of the season or closer or even the middle of the season and, you know, have people not know what to expect, both from the community and the business owners. So, but frankly, the longer this drags out, and if the applicant, if you don't do something to help us, it puts everybody in a very, very difficult spot. And, you know, that consideration then for like, oh, we don't want to put these business owners in a bad spot, it sort of goes away. And me even saying that is going to, you know, lead to people thinking that I'm pro you. I'm not. I just want this to have a resolution. You've had a restaurant there for a long time. You can continue to. Outside of this board, you're going to have to upgrade the septic. You know that. That's an EPA requirement. So I think that knowing that, I would say that within 30 days, bring us back. In addition to what Eric was saying, I want to see I'm not sure if it would be a formal submission or whatever, but give us some color as to where those grades would be. Or maybe not. Maybe leave that alone. Bring us the things that Eric is saying, the very simple changes. See if you can get to a point of approval or denial so we know how to go forward. And then once you figure out if you need a variance or you get health department approval, you can come back with a site plan that is actually consistent with that plan. But right now we don't have that. And I think that if you don't drastically reduce this, you're going to put us, frankly, in a tough spot and the whole community in a tough spot. And I think yourself in a tough spot because I feel very strongly, and I think that the other board members do, that at this point, going into the second season here, we want to come to some sort of resolution. I don't think anybody's telling you that you can't have a restaurant. Even no one's trying to drag you through the coals over that 0.02 square, I think we're being reasonable here. But I understand some of the delays. I'm certainly not doubting, your intentions. But I think that there is a path forward now to come to some sort of resolution. So I do want to, before we continue on, I do want to give you a chance. I said that I would to respond to anything that was said so far, and then we'll sort of go through the conclusions and the specific details that Eric, listed.
Again, very respectfully, I would, if I had more notice of this tonight, we would have submitted what is the new or potentially amended from what we've previously submitted, what the health department has accepted as far as the application is concerned, subject to their commentary. So I have that. Again, just didn't have enough time to submit it for tonight.
I understand, sir. I do understand. I do understand that, but I think it's problematic if the trigger was, oh, we're on the agenda again, we better submit. We've been pretty clear that we want to move this thing forward. So if you have information that's relevant to our review of this application, you shouldn't be waiting until you hear, I hope you had a good vacation. I don't think it's about your vacation or last week. I don't know how long you've had that information, but if it exists, if you have it, we should see it. And the fact that we haven't seen it, I do think is problematic. So I think that we're talking about a 30-day limit here. You're going to have an opportunity to submit more stuff. But our goal is to get to a complete application or a place where we can be, where this board can make a determination on the application. I think it would behoove you to make that as simple as possible, or at least something that can square with potential health department approval, because otherwise we can't. Again, you're putting us in a very difficult spot. There's nothing that says that if you pare this down a little bit, you can't come back later on. And I'm not even saying that there's a guaranteed path to approval. There's certainly not. But there's a path here to a complete application where this board can make a determination so everybody knows where you stand going into the next season, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. And I will indicate that as far as the health department is concerned, this was very, very recent that I've spoken to the architect and engineer. They've had many in-person sit-down meetings with the health department. And this was very recent that they got to the point after those discussions where there was a new plan that was submitted. It was only actually submitted 2 weeks ago. And frankly, they just accepted it yesterday and accepted the payment literally yesterday. So I apologize that, what I meant is I didn't even have anything to resubmit as far as the health department until literally, No,
I just to be clear, I do appreciate that. I think you've always been very respectful to the board. But at the same time, we have a situation here.
Sure.
There's violations, there's community concern, there's your business you're trying to run. So please don't take me wrong as saying you're being disingenuous here. And if truly that happened yesterday, then I'm mistaken. Point being, I think the general point still stands. You should do whatever you can to keep this thing moving. I guess with that, unless you have any other comments, we'll talk about Eric's suggestions here.
Yeah, let's do that.
And may I say something briefly? I know it's
for sure. Yeah.
Do you mind if I
Oh, sure, I'm sorry.
So I know it's getting late, but I want to just be very clear on the direction that the planning department is giving the board and the applicant. So just as a precursor, the Article 78, even if the ZBA decision is overturned, which again relates to the accessory uses on the property, that doesn't mean that this board has to approve any new structures or anything related to a site plan application that permits additional accessory uses. It would only establish that under the code, you're permitted to have other outside businesses operate catering, as an accessory use. Doesn't mean you need to provide trailer parking, any provision, for that operation. That operation would still need site plan, or alternatively, I guess, the staging of such operations would be in the road right of way or blocking parking, which itself triggers other issues, enforcement issues. So I just want to make that clear. And basically with that, so you think of, even if you start off with, three businesses operating, three different businesses operating catering out of this, obviously that's something that I don't think this board is going to favor. That being said, where we're coming from is that we don't think that even having structures and things that facilitate one accessory catering business use on this property is appropriate. And accordingly, what we would like to see, and this is where I'm getting to the specific recommendation, is to, first of all, with regard to the parking area, which I apologize, this site plan is a little difficult to see, but and again, actually, the applicant's attorney is correct. On the current plan, there is no trailer parking area delineated. That was a previous incarnation of the site plan. Currently, what they're proposing is to have 4 standard passenger vehicle parking spaces on this side of the property. Now, first of all, that's by boxing in 2 of the spaces and then putting 2 behind them. There's a grade issue here. But at the very least, what you're really providing is 2 code compliant, questionably, but let's say that for now, 2 spaces, not 4. It's de minimis given the overall operation of the site. Also, just switching back very quickly to illustrate this point, and Ian even specifically mentioned it, that's basically right now the plan for the updated sanitary system. Basically, all those rectangles you see are leaching galleys of various depth. It's very conceivable and probable that this whole area here, which represents the only area that doesn't have existing building coverage, will need to be mounded to facilitate those leaching galleys, which in and of itself is probably going to physically preclude you from putting parking in that area, because you simply can't, unless you do some kind of ramp or an elevator to get the parking up, you're not going to get it in that area. So that in and of itself, that bottom half of that open area, I think is not appropriate for parking, and there's no reason to be, forcing something into that area to provide 2 parking spaces. With regard to the seating, again, you have a similar situation. So the seating area here, which is a brick and sand patio that was built with no approvals, it was constructed illegally, is in this area. This is the essentially the nitrogen treatment units of the sanitary system. It's still not known whether or not you can actually physically get a seating area in there. And then if it is in there, what design it's going to be. Are you going to need to bring in fill? Basically, I don't think that that's a good idea. And the other side of that is, as I outlined in the memorandum, there is now an administrative process for providing outdoor seating. Basically, it permits a restaurant. This restaurant, in this case, has 76 seats. They can transfer at any one time 75% of their indoor seating to outdoor. Doesn't mean they get that in addition to the indoor. But we have a process that requires a yearly permit, yearly inspection to check that area. So what I'm recommending, and I want to be very clear on this, is that the outdoor seating area, on the western edge of the property. So again, this area here, which if you look at the survey attached with the most recent CO, is essentially just supposed to be lawn.
everything that's there on site now, and again, this parking area was constructed without your approval or the approval of any other board. This seating area was constructed without your approval or any other board. We recommend that that be removed from the site plan as a proposed structure, even though it's built, simply because, you've seen, I guess the idea here is you have a seating area there, they're proposing it, and a parking area that, facilitates the on-site operations. We've seen for a season how that operation functions. It does not function well in this residential neighborhood. So basically, and for a lot of reasons, the lack of on-site parking, the fact that this is on a corner here where, even if you do put parking spaces there, they're going to be backing out on the corner of essentially 3 roadways there. We recommend that you require that the applicants remove that, that not be something that would ultimately be approved. The plan be amended in that way. Then the previously mentioned outstanding site plan elements be provided, which again is simply the proper title on the site plan, as well as just correcting the way that the verbiage of the parking calculations, and that this minor revision to the site plan in terms of the actual physical plan, removing that stuff, you give them 30 days. And that they come back before you, you deem it complete, and you hold a public hearing for the site plan, and then we move this forward. So I just want to be very clear that that's the direction that we're giving you and the applicants as to what we think is the appropriate, elements of the site plan moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just want to respectfully submit that if we can recall the first time we came here for the work session, some of these things that we added to this site plan that are now being asked to be removed were the suggestion after discussion with this board. So, obviously, I appreciate Mr. Shantz's, position on these things. But again, specifically the parking area, we had a very clear discussion here about the issues with parking. And again, the first iteration of the site plan included the storage of trailers, which we then removed. And then due to the board's concerns about parking, we added it on the second iteration of the proposed site plan. So as far as now removing it, yes, I would agree in the sense that until we know exactly how the septic system or the new IAS system is going to impact this, I would agree that I'm not qualified to make that determination. I need to go back to the engineers, I need to go back to the architects, and they need to provide that information to me. I'm just a lawyer. So I'll do my best with that. As far as, resubmitting and correcting some of the issues so that we can get to the point of a public hearing, we completely understand that. But I do need to state for the record that both the parking area and the outdoor seating was something that we discussed at the initial meetings here, and that's why it was amended to include it on the site plan, so that we can rectify those problems. If we have to remove it now at the suggestion of the planning department because of potential, future issues, I understand that. But again, we did it because we came here to discuss it.
I don't believe we were talking about a new sanitary system from the very earliest days. So let's just, this is where we are now. We don't need to go through history.
And that is a big change. There was concern about the sanitary system, but we didn't see any kind of plan, didn't know for a fact what you had there. So you do have to understand our position that, initially we gave you some feedback. Things changed a lot, as you know. That's a big, it's a big important system. So there's a path forward here, removing those things, going the administrative route if somehow you get that system approved. Just to try to clean this up, and nothing says you can't then come back. But I think if you continue to try to wrap this all together, it's just not going to end quickly, and that's problematic. So
did the applicant just work with the planning department to?
Well, I think
these things get covered.
Yeah, but I think that we should have a consensus here. Whether we want to take the planning department's recommendations as to whether we want to give you, 30 days. And I think you think that you can do that. Obviously, you're going to talk to your client.
I am relying on the other professionals as far as, doing that. So, I respectfully, I can't conclusively say right now that that's ample time, because I got to go back to the architects and engineers to make these modifications. But as far as the, obviously title, changing the title, that's something that's very quick. Submitting what we have for the health department, again, it exists right now. We can do that.
Well, yeah, and I brought that up, but I think that maybe, more to the point is, if you go with what Eric's recommendations are, which is removing most of these things, that's not that hard. And then all those other things can happen as they happen. But at least you get to a point where we have a complete application, we can give you the determination, and you see where it goes. You have to do the septic anyway, and it doesn't make any sense to do these other things because you don't know how they're going to sit, because it depends on that septic. And in the meantime, if that flies through somehow and you're able to get the administrative permit for outdoor dining, you still do that. We're not ruining your summer ourselves. Or even if you don't get the septic approved, you can still apply for that permit. It's probably more difficult in that case. So I'm in favor of putting this 30-day limit. But to be clear, I think there might be a second pass here in which you can incorporate more of these ideas in a way that we can truly consider, knowing what the situation is going to be at that time. Does anybody disagree with Eric's, in the conclusion section, he talks about a bunch of elements that ought to be removed and the 30-day limit?
No, I don't disagree at all.
Eric's memo.
I agree.
Randy? Muted, maybe? Well, he probably agrees. If he doesn't, he's on the short end again.
Give a thumbs up.
Okay. Good.
I
Okay,
think
so
there it is.
so we'll wrap it up. Again, I do appreciate your approach before this board. I think you've been respectful. I don't mean to give you anything differently in return, but I can't emphasize enough that the importance of this time. The extensions before, we gave them to you. Nobody wants to assume anybody's got, bad intentions or trying to drag this out. But, we're at a point here going into the next season where we need to know, the community needs to know. I think your business owners need to know. So we'll give you 30 days for these things. I hope that you agree to do that. And I hope it comes back in a form that's complete and we can rule on.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate, obviously, the comments of the board. I appreciate the planning department and Mr. Shantz specifically. And thank you very much for hearing this again tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go on to 59 Gardner's Avenue modification, urban renewal.
Sure. So let me just try and.
Oh, and actually, it's a typo on the agenda. It's Gardner's Lane urban renewal. Not that clarifies much because there's several of those too, but.
The memo's correct.
Memo's correct. Yeah.
Avenue Lane. Sorry for the confusion. It's confusing enough, this request.
No, I'm the one who said it. I just wanted to clarify my words. Yeah.
So just to give you a reminder, the board discussed this a few weeks ago. This is an urban renewal map modification request, essentially to change the access point on the lot that is highlighted on the aerial in front of you. The urban renewal map essentially right now requires that access come off of, and again, another confusing point of this application, from Gardner's Lane to the southeast, not Gardner's Lane to the northwest. However, a building permit was issued for the home with the garage situated on the northern side of the residence. As you can see from the aerial, construction has already begun. So basically the applicants are requesting that the map be modified to permit the access point on the northwest side of the lot, as opposed to the way that it's required right now under the urban renewal map on the southeast side. So the board discussed this at some length the last time it was in front of you. You don't have a new memorandum from the planning department. The only new information that we have is that I did confer with the building inspector. And they, because there was a question about a pool that you can't see on this aerial, but which is currently under construction, swimming pool, just to be clear. The building department verified that that was intended to be included in the original building permit. So there was a question as to whether or not they came in after the fact and then began constructing a swimming pool without a building permit. The permitting history, just in terms of how we find it in our documentation, wasn't terribly clear, but I did get from the principal building inspector that the building department did grant approval for that. So they did not begin constructing that swimming pool without the necessary approval from the building department, as far as they have, documented the course of events. So that's the only new thing that we really have here. I will reiterate a few things, which really, the planning department's basic position is that, again, I think all the board members remember there were mistakes made, in the permitting process that resulted in this configuration of the residence on this lot. So we certainly concede to that. However, I don't think it's a great practice for the town moving forward to grant urban renewal map modifications that undo mistakes, especially when it does seem that there are other avenues that can, essentially provide adequate access to the property. Again, I will remind you that your responsibility here is to send comments to the town board. This is something that is town board authority, whether or not to modify the UR map. Basically your function is just to formulate comments. I will say that the code does state that the planning board is required to, in those comments, make a recommendation for or against this specific UR map modification. So, you can't just say, we'd like to see this, this, and this. You have to make take a definitive stance and include that in your correspondence with the town board. So, again, sort of our general position is that it's not prudent to go and modify UR maps when no good reason could be shown to do that. I don't really see that, just to correct mistakes. That being said, I will concede that the changing that access point is minimal in the sense that this is one lot. The requested access from the northwest results in a little bit more clearing within the right of way. However, it is a minimal change, this being only one lot. But again, our overriding thought on this is that unless, if you look at this, and I realize this, the board might not be, might not do this, but if you look at it in a vacuum of, if we were just looking at the UR map, not looking at the aerial, not looking at clearing, not considering the past, does it make sense to amend this map to change the access location? I don't see any reason why it does. But with that, I'll let the board discuss, and I see that the applicant's agent is here this evening. So,
can I ask you a question before
Yeah.
he moves on? Be specific. What was the mistake that was made?
So,
I'm not sure I see one.
yeah. I guess maybe I should pull up the actual urban renewal map.
The driveway was put on the wrong side.
No, I understand that, but when the building permit was issued,
Mhm.
what was the mistake that was made at that time?
Well, so the building department ideally would have reviewed the UR map and noted the fact that the configuration of the residence on the survey that was approved, which is there, or the survey that was included with the building permit, illustrated an access coming from the northwest side. And also the home was configured to have a garage on that side.
Okay. But everyone kind of understood, though, that the access point was at the southeast corner at that point. Well, despite what the site plan showed in terms of where the garage was located.
Yeah, it's difficult to answer just in that I don't know who reviewed it, whether they missed something. You know what I mean? It's difficult to say.
Well, in fairness,
the end result was that a permit was issued to come in from that access point.
But was an assumption made, though, by anyone that access would be granted from the northwest?
Well, it shows the access, and it was approved. And the
surveyor,
but
the surveyor is so
the building department to make that determination, right?
Well, they issued the permit.
That's the survey that they used, although there's some dispute about that, and I'm sure Mr. Budo.
Okay, all right. Well, we're not going to.
But that's the survey that is being claimed that was used, that was provided to the building department in order to grant the access from the northwest.
Let me take some gray area out of this, and then I want to go back to the process here. But Eric, just to be very clear, a building permit was issued that illustrates the driveway
Yes.
on this point.
Yes.
We'll discuss whatever that means.
Okay.
Anything else from you or?
No.
I didn't mean to jump in. I just want to,
No.
and I want to give the applicant a chance to speak, and then we're gonna go around the board, and there's probably gonna be a little bit of back and forth, but everyone will be heard.
Good evening, Joel Halsey, on behalf of Brooklyn Timber, representing Lighthouse Land Planning. Yeah, I mean, as Mr. Shantz stated, there were mistakes made. In fact, when I got the site, got the survey, and I went and visited the site, it's tough to find these areas, so I put it in my GPS, and it actually took me up Gardner's Lane right here. So when I looked at the survey, I just assumed that everything was correct. Submitted to the building department for the application, the exact survey that you just saw, and that's what the building permit we were issued on. So yes, there were mistakes made. The access was not reviewed. And again, when you look at a property, most people assume the access is going to be on the front of the lot, not the side of the lot. And yeah, I'm not 100, I live in Mount Tauk, I'm not 100% familiar with Springs. I didn't realize Gardner's Lane even did this funky little loop there when I was reviewing the building permit, when I was preparing the building permit application. So to that point, the house was built, the house was put under construction. As you can see from the picture, this is the garage right now. So to come in from here to loop all the way around here to try to get into the garage, it kind of puts an unfair burden on the property owner at this point. Again, I didn't really was hoping to make this a quick night tonight for you guys. Well, from
How's that working out
from my point. But again, I was only here to kind of reiterate. There was a question at the last hearing, which Tara Burke Burke handled for me, and she did a very good job. And I figured tonight I was only here to kind of reiterate, yes, there was a building permit issued for the pool. There was a statement in the memo prepared by Mr. Buddha that there was no building permit for that pool. There is a building permit for this pool. There was a statement in the memo that this is a planned park right here. And the memo I submitted said 2011. I apologize for that. This was a planned park in 1911. So, if this is going to disrupt the planned park that was designed in 1911, that hasn't been built in 2023, I don't know why this access would disrupt a planned park, which it just says park on the map from 1911.
I don't want to make you speak more than you intend to, but I do have one question because I think it's relevant. Have you abandoned those roadways?
We are working on the abandonment for the roadways. I've never had this happen before. The county rejected them, which they reject a lot of things, but they rejected it because they wanted 4 original copies of the certificate of abandonment. I received those on Monday. They will be going to the title company this week and back to the county, hopefully not get rejected a second time.
Okay, anything else?
That's it for now.
We'll go to the board. I imagine, Mr. Booty, you want to say something? Or
yes, please.
You know the rules. We've been over it. We don't normally hear. No, for sure. But actually, generally, like this, when this is not a public hearing, but I get this is your one time to be heard. You'll have your chance before the town board. But yes, 3 minutes or less. We appreciate your submissions and we've read them.
Thank you. The so-called problem now confronting a sophisticated builder and his team of professionals is one that was entirely of their own making and entirely avoidable. I don't know if it was the result of extreme arrogance or disregarding the principal building inspector's directions not to make the access where they initially started to, or whether it was incompetence. Apparently, because someone could not properly read and understand the town's old filed map study plan, they planned to build a new house with a somewhat unusual orientation, with a garage not located so it would be nearest to the existing street access point as authorized and directed by the urban renewal map plan. The plan assumed the private developer could simply force the town to permit the opening of a portion of a roadway that had been for about 45 years plainly designated as to be abandoned. When their proposed property survey was submitted to the building department for review for issuance of a building permit in or about July of 2021, the notation proposed extension of Gardner's Lane to connect to the northwest corner of the subject property was promptly, if not immediately, flagged by the building department as having been improper, unauthorized, and contrary to the urban renewal plan. The builder then simply ignored this direction from the building department, disregarded the town's posted no vehicles sign, and sent its land clearing bulldozer down the wrong path. When the commencement of the initial—
Mr. Buda, really quickly, just keep your comments respectful. I understand what you're trying to say, but try not to ridicule too much the intention of them. I understand what you're doing. I'll give you more time for the one of my comments.
Thank you. When the commencement of initial land clearing activity was observed by me on November 24th, 2021, I contacted the building department that day and was informed by the principal building inspector, and I provided you with the email, that, quote, this has already been looked into and they were made aware of that they need to take access onto Gardner's Lane and only over their property that they can abandon. You have a copy of what the building department considers to be the survey that's associated with the building permit. It's not the one that the builder has given you. As of November 24th, 2021, absolutely no building construction had occurred, only the initial commencement of land clearing activity. This is a modular
20
build,
seconds.
and if the builder had wanted to, it could have easily and simply modified its plan so as to relocate the garage to the other side of the house, which is identical to the design of another house that is simultaneously building at 4 Square Road. Instead, they did not make any change to the building design. Last paragraph. Recently, they started the process of obtaining the abandonment of the 20-foot wide half portion of Gardner's Lane that is located immediately to the south and west of the subject property, and that will be eventually taken care of.
Thank you very much.
I just have one sentence.
Okay.
They have already fully cleared that area that is being added to the subject property so it can serve as an alternate driveway access from the southeast corner of the property where it connects to another segment of Gardner's Lane at its intersection with President Street. If you have been there,
Thank you.
see that
Mr.
driveway.
Buda, thank you. And try to really keep it within 3 minutes because it makes it very difficult. We do want to hear your thoughts. They're important, but it's difficult if it's, going longer. But thank you.
That was pretty close.
I was generous. Okay, this,
I can start.
we'll go to the board and whoever wants to start, Lou.
Yeah, there's one thing that I don't understand. I was remiss when this application was in front of us the last time for not going to the site. I did that today. And Eric, unlike Joel's GPS, my GPS insisted on taking me through to the southeast entry to the property. I had to override it to come by 3 Mile Harbor and then cut across. I forgot the name of that street. But anyway, when I got to the property, there's already an old paved road that you can make a right on in the northwest section of the property. There's a road, and I'm sorry, there's a road on the western part of the property that's accessed from the north. It's not a wooded area, it's a paved road, and it's not newly paved. It's been paved for a long time. It's got cracks in it, it's old. So I don't understand this thing about clearing. It's already cleared. I know the property itself maybe needs to be cleared to create the driveway, which is a small area. So I don't understand this problem about, clearing and, modifying. It's not a big deal in my eyes from just looking at it.
Yeah, it's not a large amount of additional clearing that would be required, but I think if I can zoom in here, I think what you're referring to is this portion of Gardner's Lane. So it's a little, obviously when you don't have references and you have woods here, but I think this is what you're referring to, that's the existing area.
Doesn't abut.
So what they're proposing though is to come around here and have a parallel one that would come in. So I'm not sure if that's what
Is that a paved road there?
this is paved.
But it doesn't abut.
Yeah.
In between is
Yeah,
town
there's a
owned land.
piece here that's
I was on the same road today.
town owned that's between them. We're not talking about a huge area here, so it's easy to miss that and think that this is.
So
all
you would
that
have to
lot.
clear the area between the paved road
Yes.
and the driveway to the garage. No, not that way.
Yeah, no, what he just did.
Yeah, you would, under the proposal, if you had an access point here, you'd be coming in, heading east and then coming down south.
Why can't you come down the paved road and then just cut from the paved road?
They could.
Where
No,
now?
you'd have to cross town land. You couldn't do that.
Yeah, you have to
That's
go
the
right.
1911
You'd have
proposed
to go
part.
through a piece of property.
Well, you could modify the UR map to have the roadway come in from this direction, but that's not what's being requested. That would also be a UR map modification.
And you can,
It doesn't also solve the problem that the applicants have that their garage is over here. You know what I mean? You'd be coming in here, and then, if you wanted to get to that garage, you'd have to come up, this side, which right now with the existing access point here, you could do the same thing in theory.
And the other
Doesn't solve the problem for the applicant, I would think, if I'm misrepresenting that.
The other point that I wanted to clear up, which Mr. Buddha raised, and I don't know if it was clear in his comments, is that the survey that was submitted to the building department to get approval for the northwest access, the one that Mr. Buddha had in his email showed that access was crossed out by somebody. And then the highlight, it was the southeast corner was highlighted as though no on the northwest and yes on the southeast. And Mr. Buddha claims that that's the survey that was used by the building department to grant the permit. So do we have clarification
I don't.
on that?
I don't, and really, I wouldn't want to mischaracterize the history of what happened with the building department. If you needed some kind of testimony to that effect, I would say that you should probably get that directly from the building department.
But I think it's important because if they gave a permit based on a survey that says you can have access from the northwest, that's a lot different than if they gave a permit with the entry being on the southeast. And in terms of me fashioning my decision on where to go with this, and then granting a permit for the pool as well. So that makes a big difference to me as to, how to decide this issue.
Well, to be clear, Eric, have you looked at the building department file? And I mean, I've never seen a survey that looks like that. That would be an approved survey.
I've looked at the documents that are available on our document database called PaperVision that were posted. That's where I pulled these documents from. I haven't looked at any actual physical file that was maintained.
So the one you showed us came from that file?
Yes.
So the one he showed us that shows the access came from the file he has access to. The other one came from the public, which obviously came from the building department to him, but it
You have the email.
For sure. I'm not trying to mischaracterize anything. I just want to.
Where did you get that?
From Ann Glennon by email, and I've given you the email
Yeah.
where she reiterates.
They have to go to the podium, please.
No, we're good.
Sorry, man.
Or don't.
Can we keep moving?
Okay, anything else from you, Lou?
No.
Ed.
All right. My overarching sense of this is that mistakes were made. Listen, I appreciate the mistakes get made, Joel, but I think you made a mistake here. I really do. I think you made a mistake. And I think it's a very bad precedent for us to try to correct that now, right? For us to sort, I don't want to. I've been here a number of times, looked at this situation, and I think it would be a shame to take 3,600 square feet of woodland down for only to kind of accommodate this. I mean, clearly, I have to say this. This is, from a real estate perspective, the better orientation for this house, because it reads as though all the wooded land in front of it is part of its property in a way, right? I mean, so I can understand the developer's desire to do that, but I think it feels to me like there was ample opportunity to kind of understand what access really was to this thing and correct it before the property was built, building permit or no building permit. So I'm not inclined to take any action on this that would allow the access from the northwest.
Michael?
That was kind of my attitude when this first came to us, but I've visited the site and I'm more inclined, and yeah, this is a big mistake. Who made it matters, I think, a little bit. What I found interesting when I visited the site, that the road, the path for the trucks to do all the construction was not at the northwest. It was down at the south. That's where, so why wasn't, when the construction began, did the trucks come from the north?
Because eventually, after a lot of the construction had happened, Ann was either going to put a stop work order or we had to go through the southwest. So they started all construction going through the southwest.
Southeast.
Sorry, southeast.
Okay.
Now, again, mistakes were made. There were definitely mistakes were made, but
let's not go too much back and forth here. I'd like to go around and we'll give you a chance to respond if that's okay.
I think this is a big mistake, and I'm trying to like visualize this, get this. I would vote for allowing the northwest access.
And by the way, I'm going to give everybody a chance to, after we hear from everybody else's comments, if you want to, this is a
The
worth
northwest
talking about.
axis is where they have it right now, the way it's oriented right now.
The front of the building,
Yeah, this is the northwest. Yeah.
faces west.
Yeah.
That's the front door,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I clarify something too? Just as relates to the UR map. So if you don't mind, if I just can come up there. I just want to show you, this is, we routinely prepare for you the existing and then proposed UR map, existing being what it is drawn, how it's drawn today. And then if you followed the requested UR map modification. So this is the proposed map. Again, you've seen this before, but basically this would be, doing what we were just talking about, that L shape from the northwest coming down, changing the access point to be here as opposed to here where it is on the existing map. But just so you know, when you read these maps, that hash marked area that's adjacent to the west and southern boundaries of the lot, and again, the lot here is parcel number 27. Those hash marked areas are portions of essentially town-owned public roadways that are to be abandoned. So basically under the UR map program, the old file map study, adjoining property owners are allowed to claim to the midway point of those roadways where that hash marking is. So you can actually see it if you look. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Well, for everyone who's been there, what he's talking about right now is where the current driveway, the access is.
Yeah. So like, to give you an example here on the southern end, and I apologize, it's tough to see, but you see this lot right here? Under the UR map, they have already claimed their right to that, this roadway comes in like this, and you can see that their property juts out like that. This property claimed their right to half of that road right of way. So when you go back to the UR map, and I'm letting you guys know this just because this relates to, if you do approve the modification, what options are available to the applicants, or if you don't. So again, this is that lot. So you'll see now, if that stupid thing could
go away. There we go. So you'll see you see how this hash mark here is of a certain width and then it's cut in half right there. That's that lot I was just showing you on the aerial. So they already claimed their half of the road right away. Lot 27, which is the applicant's subject property, is, and forget about this drawing for a second, is entitled to claim to the halfway point of this hash mark around the western side, going all the way around to there.
Essentially where that access that everybody who's visited the site saw.
So they could come in where they're supposed to come in and come around.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
Well,
that's an
they have to do the
important distinction to make.
They'd have to do that.
It's silly in a way to have a driveway that's that long, but that lot is, and that doesn't require any approvals. It's not discretionary. That map was approved by the town board in 1977, and all property owners where that illustration is given have the right just to go to Suffolk County Real Property in our assessor's office and claim those portions to the halfway point of those roadways. So I want to add that to the discussion because presumably, and property owners don't have to do that, but you have free land that's available.
Well, they've already said that they're doing it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But just so you know, that's so that lot will increase in dimensions by 20 feet. That's a 40-foot wide right of way.
Great.
So can I just ask you,
Eric.
so, all right, go.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Eric, along while you're there, the access that's proposed has town land that has the right to abandon the 20 feet out. In fact,
that's correct. Parcel 26.
So if parcel 26 abandons half of the road, the town that is, and takes it, these guys don't have the right to cross that.
That's correct. But again, this is a modification that is the discretion of the town board. So if the town board wants to permit that modification as they've requested, they can, or, you know what I mean? So I get your point and you're right as the map is drawn, but the town hasn't claimed it because in essence, the town already owns it until, you know, somebody would claim it. Now, you know, if not lot number 26 was privately owned, that private individual would have the right to claim it. But as you point out, parcel number 26 is town owned. So,
okay. Sharon, I want to let.
Well, I just, so the road access added, right, that goes in around to that 27, that is a road, but it's town owned?
yes, everything you see here is a town right of way.
Okay.
You know, all the surrounding roadways are town owned.
Mm-hmm.
But again, where you see on the UR map, that hash marking, that means the adjoining property owner is allowed to claim to the midway point as a matter of right.
Sure.
And if the town approved this, they're effectively giving up their right to then claim that because the map would be changed. So
yeah, correct.
We have to be clear about what we're talking about, what's proposed and what currently is. Sharon,
That's not as simple as it might sound. To be alienating public land to a private property owner, and certainly alienating all of lot 26.
It's within a right of way, though.
Yeah, it's not truly town land yet because they haven't abandoned it. So, but Randy, hang on one second. We're gonna go back to you and let Sharon finish up, but you have full turn.
No, this was actually really helpful because I think I was sort of leaning towards allowing for the modification, but now that I see that they have that, you know, that opportunity to abandon those roads and come in and around and yeah, there was a mistake made, but it can be corrected, you know, just by abandoning those roads and coming in and around and not changing the
and one last thing just to aid the conversation. So again, if you look at this aerial photograph, it makes it look like the front of the residence is very close to that property line on the west. Those lines are not exact. If you look at that building permit that we survey we were looking at, you'll see that it's scaled out there. There's actually 30 feet from the front edge of the residence at its south side here to the property line. And then again, the midway point of this portion of Gardner's Lane would be an additional 20 feet.
Great. Okay.
I just want to add one quick thing. Can you go back to the satellite view?
Sure.
So when I visited the site, there was someone you can see a path. See, like the sort of S, that is a path in the town-owned land of this quote-unquote park. And someone took their bicycle from the southwest, and you can see the path, and they went right up through there. So if you're going to put a driveway in the southwest, you're essentially like blocking that existing walking path, bike path through there. Do you see what I'm?
Yeah,
see what I'm
it's not
saying?
shown on the official trails layer. I will just,
Okay.
but you're right. I mean, you can see that it clearly
Created one.
exists on the aerial.
Created one,
Any-
yeah.
Okay, anything,
And I imagine it's just a path used by the locals.
Yeah.
anything else for you, Sharon?
No, that's it.
Randy, sorry to keep you waiting.
That's okay. So I agree with Ed on this. I think the urban renewal maps were made so that they gave people guidance about how to develop these areas that were, filed before zoning. And that the access proposed in the urban renewal map makes sense, and it's a good one. It also appears to me that just the foundation is saying, we're not talking about an entire house.
No, the whole house is in.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. And the pool,
yeah,
and the pool, and the pool.
and the pool. Yeah, I don't see the rationale for changing the access from the urban renewal map. That's all.
Great. Okay. I want to. I'm going to give everybody a chance. There's been different opinions, and I want to give Joel a chance. I didn't want to cut you off and leave you hanging, but look, mistakes were made here. I think at this stage, I got to believe a couple of mistakes: the application for the permit, and then the granting of the permit. As I said last time, I'm really reluctant. I don't want to guess what somebody should have known, or if somebody applies for a building permit. I do think as a town, our backstop is, if we as a town don't look at that and make sure that we look at the urban renewal access in the maps, I don't think it's fair to expect the applicant to do it. I don't think that means this is automatically granted, but I just want to be, self-aware.
But didn't we get information that the building department did look at the urban renewal map?
Well, there was some information, but frankly, that map is not any kind of map that I've ever seen approved. I 100% agree that it came from the building department. Not clear when that came. I don't know when there's no date on the scribble. There's an X and some highlighters. It's real hard to believe that was what, how the permit was issued. At some point, it seems like that map was drawn. I don't know at which point. I don't think it takes away the town's mistake in the first instance, especially because Eric pulled the survey we looked at, which was a more formal, typical survey we would see from the file available to the town. So weighing all that evidence as we see it, I find it very hard to believe that the highlighter X map was the go-to building permit map, even though apparently that came up at some point. Here's what I want to say. So mistakes were made. So what do we do now to have the best situation? They're currently abandoning those 2 rows. You're already using it. I'm not sure if that's legal or what, but it's been cleared. It's been cleared where you come in off of the southeast. Presumably, it will remain cleared, and I think it results in more clearing than if the other part was used. So I'm just going to float something, which is probably going to be a minority opinion and might not even be, appealing to the applicant. But if you complete that abandonment and you agree to revegetation and put some sort of easement over there, so the town is guaranteed to have, yes, it's on your property and not town property, or, could be town property if it were abandoned. The result would be natural vegetation preserved in perpetuity, yes, on the applicant's property. But, I don't know if would you even agree to that?
Well, I was going to take it one step further to your point on the trail. If we were to use that as a driveway, can you go back to the aerial?
Yeah.
I did notice a trail here, but now that you think about it, that trail does connect here to here. If there's, again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to speak if this is something that's possibly can be done, but if we could put some sort of small trail easement between the town-owned property and to connect Gardner's Lane to Gardner's Lane. So people could.
I mean, look, again, based on everything that's been said, I think I'm in the minority, but I think that this is a bad situation to be in. I wish that it wasn't built, no permit, no application. I wish it was just done properly. Everybody does, but we're here. And I think that it would be a win, frankly, if instead of those, that big L that's going to be entirely cleared in a formal driveway, which doesn't make sense for the landowner. I don't think the town gains much. I think ultimately it's more clearing both on the property and in the town. So my recommendation, again, probably not going to fly here, would be that we recommend to the town that they do change this with the caveat.
I think this is what you're saying, right?
100%, thank you, because maybe I'm saying it poorly. But so that whole blue area, which is now the access, and which if we don't do anything here, will remain the access, is way more clearing than that small little piece. Now, everybody has a good point that the town could abandon that other piece. And
Eric, could you draw that line on the northwest entrance that is being proposed?
Sure, and I'll try to be contrasting.
But it's only the part from that right-hand turn, so it's less.
Yeah, so I think what Ian is saying, I mean, I drew a single line, but I think what he's saying is, they can claim to the halfway portion here. So if you made this entire area here an easement, which instead of claiming it and then having it be part of their lot, have it be an easement untouched as a buffer, and then permit them to do, am I correct?
Yeah. What I'm saying is, before we were like, oh, they're going to cut in and have to drive around the pool. That's not true. They're going to abandon this roadway, open it all up. It's already been done. And then there's going to be a ton more clearing. They're going to wrap around their house. They're not going to stop before they get to their garage. There's no chance because they don't have to. So all I'm saying is, given the situation we're in, I wouldn't have designed it this way. If the applicant were willing to put a scenic easement, maybe a trail through there, revegetate thoroughly because you have cleared it, that I think that's the best place we could end up.
I believe the scenic easement somehow, if legally it's possible to.
Right, whatever, yeah. If there,
I have known of trail easements to go through people's properties, so.
Okay. Well, so anyway, I want to float that idea and what everybody else has said. If anybody wants to chime in now based on, any other comments, please do.
I was leaning towards what Sharon was saying, agreeing with her. But now that I look at it from this point of view, I kind of like your idea, Ian, because if we're thinking about if we're balancing one option against the other in terms of clearing, the Ian idea is certainly the best option to have the least amount of clearing. So if clearing is the criteria that we're using, then Ian's idea should be the way to go.
To be clear, the planning department, I think, would point out that, town-owned land that's uncleared is slightly preferable. But again, we're in this situation and there's quite a disparity there in terms of what's more and less. So
that's still,
I'm not trying to talk you off.
No.
That's still going to require a urban renewal map modification because.
That's why, Randy, that's why we're here, to give the town advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, right now the access is from the southeast corner, so you're going to move the access up to.
Well, that's the request. Yeah. It's a modification request currently.
Yeah, your recommendation, and not to put words in your mouth, but just based on this conversation, your recommendation to the town board could be, that you support changing the access location provided this mitigation, and other aspects of the modification are included. But then otherwise, unless
those were the words I meant to say.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, I mumbled them, but whatever.
No, 100%. I think with it, it has to be both, though.
Yeah. And does that include the trail easement, or is that 3? Because that could be 3, right?
I fully, 3. Yeah, I just mean the preserved part of your abandonment in order to change the urban renewal map.
I could go for that. Your recommendation. So is that what we're going to recommend?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So Ed, Lou, Sharon.
No, I support the Ian.
Randy, do you have any thoughts?
Ian, I would go along with that, but if they actually donated the land, not an easement, but they abandon it, donate the land as part of open space.
Does anybody else think that's? I would stop short of that, but
if it's an easement, you're still getting the same thing.
Sorry.
How's it different?
Randy, what's the advantage of that?
Versus
what difference does it make?
I think an alternative way of phrasing or setting up what Randy was saying is basically the applicants foregoing their right to claim the portion of the right of way that they're entitled to under the UR map.
Yeah.
Right. So rather than claiming it and then giving it to the town, it's basically just saying we're not going to claim it, even though it's our right under the UR.
I'm less favorable to that because it's already cleared.
Yeah.
So if that happens, I think this will forever be a sand driveway without native
Yeah, there should
vegetation.
certainly be revegetation in many areas.
And again, I do think we have to recognize as a town some culpability here. And so everybody made mistakes, but what do we do now that I think lands us in the best
I think
place?
that's a Solomon-like.
Yeah, if it's their land, they're more likely to want to revegetate it, and then it's a buffer for them too.
Well, not more likely to want to. We're going to,
Have
would be
to.
required. Well,
Yeah.
the good news is we don't really get to decide. But I think we can come to an end with this application, and Randy is kind of on the fence and might not be in favor, but at least is partially in favor of the kind of concept. But we have 5 others who are.
Yeah.
So
The concept's good. I like Eric's solution better. Because, if you own the land, then you can put a trail through it. The town ultimately would abandon its right of way. That would connect to the rest of this land. If you have an easement,
the
I
town
don't
couldn't
know.
abandon their land at that point because that would be the access.
Well, if it's
No, the land next to their park.
The land in the north.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And
Okay.
I would love this notion. I just want to make sure that someone can ride their bike from the southwest through that little path and go up there.
That would be part of our recommendation.
Forever.
So Eric,
Yeah.
our plan. So Eric, you understand what we're saying?
Yes.
So we don't have any authority here, but I think our recommendation to the board would be all of those things.
Yep. Yeah, I think we can write it up in a coherent way in a recommendation to the town board.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Buddha. We sincerely do appreciate your comments. So, okay, we'll go on to the regular meeting. Well, actually, first, there's a few boards of review. First item on the agenda, look at that. Brooklyn Timber LLC for a building permit on premises located at 59 Gardeners Lane, Springs. Just to clarify, this is associated with this lot. It has nothing to do with the roads we just talked about.
Okay.
It's a road assignment that's, elsewhere in the neighborhood just to improve roads, totally unrelated to this project. The undertaking is the amount of $22,500. I move for the adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Good night, Joel.
Opposed? Pass and carry. Next, Board of Review, Carlos Bermeo, for a building permit on premises located at 26 3rd Street, Springs. This is also for a road assignment in the amount of $24,000. I have read the Board of Review and move for its adoption. Anybody?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass and carry. Next item is Chris and Julie Miller for a building permit on premises located at 6 Fort Lane, Montauk. This is a unique one that I don't think I've ever seen. The engineer has said that the existing conditions meet the standards, and so there's actually no money involved here. But I have read the Board of Review and move for its adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Pass and carried. The last Board of Review, Glenn Glasser for a building permit on premise located at 1 Fort Lane, Montauk. Same scenario as the last one. This is a road that needs no improvement, so there's no fee associated. I've read the Board of Review and move for its adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried. Opposed. I heard everybody say aye, but opposed? No, pass and carried. Okay. Then quickly on to our regular meeting. First item is 351 Panago Road for a modification. This is Sharon's.
Yep. In the matter of the application of 351 Pantaco subwaiver, tax map number 300-189-1-2. This is an amendment to a resolution that we previously approved. I've read it and moved for its adoption.
Thank you. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed and carried. Next item is map of Kathleen Dodge to schedule a public hearing. This is Luz.
In the matter of the application of map of Kathleen Dodge minor subdivision, Suffolk County tax map number 300-144.1-1-84. a public hearing is hereby scheduled to be held at Town Hall, 159 Pantago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard to consider the said application. I've read the notice and I move for a motion to schedule the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passed and carried. Next item is Margulies LLM modification. In the matter of application, Margulies lot line modification for resolution amendment of approval. I've read the resolution and move for its adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed and carried. Last item on the agenda is 3 Mile Harbor Vista 2 for a modification, and this is Ed Cruz.
In the matter of the application of 3 Mile Harbor Vista 2, minor subdivision, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-94-02-01. I have read the resolution amending approval and call for its adoption.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed and carried. Great. Well, sort of a long night. Want to say one more time, we wish Sam well. We miss you. Hopefully you'll be back soon. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Sam, Ian's doing a great job. He's going to take over. Come back
Do
soon.
I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.